Xiaoyu noticed Su Zhang wasn't saying anything and stormed off toward the hotel room. The two of them walked inside, and Xiaoyu immediately tore off his restrictive suit jacket, revealing the white dress shirt underneath. He was burning up inside, a light sweat breaking out across his shirt clinging to his damp back like a second skin. Cheng's eyes locked onto that waist, the way a kid eyes a jar of candy on a high shelf. Just had to reach out and grab it. But the moment Su Zhang's hand landed on Xiaoyu's waist, it was slapped away hard. Su Zhang's face went blank with shock, like a kid who'd done something wrong without even knowing it. It was the first time in Su Zhang's life he'd ever seen Xiaoyu blow up at him. He had no idea what to do, just stood there froze, completely lost. Xiaoyu forgot all about playing the sad, pitiful role, the whole the innocent act. He pointed right in Su Zhang's face and let loose every lad in the couple's fight playbook. After he finished laying into, Xiaoyu crossed his arms and glared at Su Zhang, waiting for a response. Su Zhang had never been through anything like this in his life. That razor-sharp brain of his actually hit its limit. Completely fried, overheated, totally crashed. He couldn't get a single word out, just stood there like a statue. Watching Su Zhang still look the same, calm, quiet, unreadable, Xiaoyu realized all his punches had just landed on thin air. By the time Su Zhang snapped out of it and started to speak, Xiaoyu turned away and said he didn't want to hear it. But Su Zhang could see that Xiaoyu was hurting. He tried to move closer, wanting to hold him. Xiaoyu told him not to touch him, to back off. Su Zhang did exactly that and stepped away, which somehow made Xiaoyu even angrier. The air between them got suffocating, and the silence only made it worse. Xiaoyu finally cracked and asked if he had anything to say. Su Zhang just looked at him, all innocence, and you said you didn't want to hear me talk. Xiaoyu's temper flared immediately. Then at least come over here and calm me down. Su Zhang, even more innocent. You told me to back off. Boy was sitting out, practically grinding his teeth. What if I told you to break up with me? Would you do that too? Xiongmen completely stood. He looked more like a stone statue than ever. But for the first time, Xiaoyu caught a ripple in those always calm eyes. In all the time they'd been together, this was the first crack he'd ever seen in Su Zhang's composure. Su Zhang stood up, his face helpless, and asked, "Do you actually want to break up?" Xiaoyu was quiet for a long moment, and looking at that lost expression, he just couldn't do it. He said no. Su Zhang immediately let out a breath of relief, like he'd just been given a pardon. Then Su Zhang laughed. "Then why did you say that?" He asked a completely serious, but Xiaoyu had no patience to walk him through it. He pinched the bridge of his nose and said he was tired and needed to rest. He told Su Zhang to head home, and that they'd talk once this project was wrapped up. With that, Su Zhang headed for the door, but he kept glancing back every few seconds. That reluctant look completely lost on Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu had his head down, lost in self-doubt and self-pity, totally missing the way Su Zhang was looking at him. A few days later, Xiaoyu wrapped up the project. He looked at the call log on his phone and let out a bitter laugh, while thinking, yeah, figures. Once again, he was the only one holding a grudge. Meanwhile, at the office, Su Zhang had caught Li Lixi's attention. Seeing that Su Zhang was clearly in a bad mood, Li Lixi walked over and asked what was going on. Su Zhang told her what happened that night, asking why Xiaoyu would suddenly bring up breaking up and then take it back. It was really bothering him. Li Lixi spoke like someone who'd been around the block. It's just a move to pressure you and make you scared of losing him. But you can't let that slide. Once he sees it works, he'll keep using a breakout card as leverage, and your relationship will fall apart. Su Zhang half believed her, while Li Lixi wore the look of someone whose plan was going perfectly. That same evening, when Su Zhang invited Xiaoyu to a company bingo, Xiaoyu dropped the cold shoulder and said yes right away. He told himself it was just to repay Su Zhang a favor, but still took his time getting dressed up. At the banquet, someone approached Su Zhang, wanting him to manage their money. But Su Zhang simply said his fund and asset management slots for the year were full, and he wasn't taking on new plans. The guy wouldn't give up, going on and on about how he'd pay a huge commission. But Su Zhang didn't budge. He had a set limit, and that was that. Didn't matter if it was 100 million or a billion, Su Zhang's principles weren't for sale. Xiaoyu slipped away to the restroom, and on the way back ran right into the same guy who'd been pitching Su Zhang. Xiaoyu gave him a polite smile, but the man stepped right up to him, all charm, and said his company had significant pull in the education sector, and if Xiaoyu was willing, he could help their group schools fast track accreditation. Xiaoyu didn't think much of himself, that a big shot like this would go out of his way to dig up info on him and then offer him a deal out of nowhere. He figured we're probably all just riding on Su Zhang's coattails. Xiaoyu wasn't one to beat around the bush, so he just said straight up, thanks, but I'm already handling that myself. And if you're hoping I'll change Su Zhang's mind about work, that's not gonna happen. The man just smiled and said directly, you had some trouble a while back. And then Su Zhang broke his own rule to take on an extra client just to help you out, didn't he? Since you two are so close, I figured if you asked, he wouldn't mind making exception for one more client. Xiaoyu froze. He had no idea any of that had happened. Xiaoyu had even less patience for this guy cornering him by the bathroom, and simply said, look, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't interfere with his work. Please leave me alone. Hearing that, the man's temper flared, and he said to Xiaoyu, fine, Su Zhang's not interested in my offer, but who do you think you are to give me attitude? You're nobody. Xiaoyu had never been talked down to like that. His face flushed instead. His fist clapped. Every part of him wanted to flatten this guy's nose. But he held back. Because the man was wrong about one thing. Xiaoyu really was in no position to get in this big shot's face. If he lost it and swung at the guy, sure, he'd feel great. But Su Zhong would be the one cleaning up the mess. He didn't want that. Xiaoyu walked back to the party, surrounded by glitz and glamour, but all he felt was a deep, knowing sense that he didn't belong. He realized he was drifting further and further from who he used to be, and further from Su Zhong too. Li Lixi noticed Xiaoyu. She deliberately asked Xiaoyu for her take on the financial landscape, just to watch her embarrass her. But Xiaoyu could barely follow what they were even talking about, let alone join the conversation. Lucky for her, her phone rang just in time. She grabbed it and stepped away to take the call. It was her grandfather. He filled her in on a new work arrangement. He was planning to hand her the group's overseas project. Xiaoyu was thrilled to get that kind of opportunity. She'd already been bored out of her mind at the party. After hanging up, she found Su Zhong and told him she had to head back to the hotel. When Su Zhong offered to walk her back, Li Lixi got salty. She made a show of complimenting how close they were, but she was really fishing to find out if Xiaoyu was staying in the States. Xiaoyu had no patience for Li Lixi's games. She rolled her eyes and called her out on the spot, telling her to stop obsessing over someone else's boyfriend. Hearing that, Li Lixi immediately put on a wounded look and said, "Are you seriously misreading this? Su Zhong and I are just friends. Besides, I know which way he swings. Why would I even go there?" Xiaoyu had seen that response coming from a mile away. She didn't bother engaging. She just got Su Zhong and left. By the time they got back to the hotel, Li Xi had already called, saying she was worried about being misunderstood, and asking Su Zhong to clear things up with Xiao. When Su Zhong relayed that to her, Xiaoyu just gave a cold nod, and went back to scrolling through the overseas project files her grandfather had sent. Su Zhong clearly picked up on her coldness. A little lost, he glanced over and asked what she was doing. Xiaoyu still didn't look up. She told him that her grandfather was making her president of the group's international division. Su Zhong nodded. They mentioned he was starting a new research project, so he'd probably be staying in the States for another year. That stopped Xiaoyu cold. She looked up and asked why it was another year now. Su Zhong launched into a long explanation, packed with jargon nobody could follow. All she heard was "Umu." She gave a cold laugh and said, "When you came to the States, you never even told me. You just said 1 year. Now it's another year, and again you're not even asking me. I bet by then you'll have completely forgotten you got a boyfriend back in Asia." Su Zhong just said his memory wasn't that bad, and he wouldn't forget. Xiaoyu's voice suddenly shot up, like a tightly wound string, finally snapping. "Do you even remember you promised you'd only be gone a year? You clearly don't care about me at all. What's even the point of us anymore? Let's just break up." Su Zhong couldn't believe it. Just a few days later, Xiaoyu was bringing up a breakup again. Honestly, when Xiaoyu blurted it out, even she was caught off guard. Once the shock faded, she felt something like anticipation. She was waiting for him to fall apart the way he had last time. But instead, Su Zhong asked her in that calm, clinical tone of his whether she was using the breakup threat to trigger his act and pressure him into back. Hearing that, felt like someone had their hands around her throat. She couldn't say a word. Then Su Zhong switched into full lecture mode. "That kind of behavior only hurts what we have. If something's bothering you, we can talk it through. Don't use a breakup as a weapon." Su Zhong's calm, measured tone cut deeper than any yelling or fighting ever could. A Xiaoyu, who'd gone off the rails out of anxiety, looked like a complete fool next to the cool, collected Su Zhong. Her mind was a total mess, and his endless talking was giving her a headache. She cut him off, and asked point blank she was the one who brought up the break, and she wasn't changing her mind. Su Zhong blinked and said, "Those two things have nothing to do with each other." Xiaoyu repeated herself, this time putting heavy emphasis on the words "did," and practically grinding them out through clenched teeth. Su Zhong said yes firmly, and added that threatening a breakup doesn't fix anything. Something inside Xiaoyu just snapped. In an instant, the pounding headache was gone, the anxiety was gone, and all that was left was a dead hollow silence. The light went out of her eyes, replaced by something eerily calm. She looked just as composed as Su Zhong now. In a flat, mechanical voice, she said, "Warda." That stunned Su Zhong. Xiaoyu said she meant it this time. She couldn't even explain how she'd suddenly steeled herself and made the call. Su Zhong clearly had no idea how things had spiraled this far, this fast. His brain hit a wall, completely shut down. "As Xiaoyu said, I said it seriously. I trust you respect that." The moment she said the word respect, Su Zhong had no choice but to nod and say he respected her decision. Any moment Xiaoyu had left one ice cold, but something still felt off to Su Zhong. It was like a piece of him had been hollowed out. He asked if she was absolutely sure. Xiaoyu gathered every bit of courage she had and said yes. But she looked down as she said, unable to meet his eyes, terrified that one look at his face would make her crumble. Afraid she'd get swept up in him all over again, she told him to leave right away. Su Zhong, ever the rule follower, nodded and walked out when she asked him to go. But every step he took felt impossibly heavy, like he was carrying the weight of the world. Step by step, he moved further from Xiaoyu, until the door clicked shut, and she was completely out of sight. That was the last time Su Zhong saw Xiaoyu for the next 2 years. After breaking up with Su Zhong, Xiaoyu found a drive in herself that was impossible to ignore. Or maybe she'd always had that drive, she'd just been pouring it all into Su Zhong so it never showed. And without him, she threw herself completely into the overseas division. and she started to shine. Xiaoyu became president of the overseas business division. Within a year, she led the acquisition of a high-end private education group in Malaysia. It was Yu Zhou's first step in going global. That $500 million deal went through without a hitch. It not only cemented her place at Yu Zhou Group, it made her a name to know in the industry. But then a black swan event hit, and every school under Yu Zhou Group shut down. Operations ground to a halt. Everyone had been counting on the overseas schools to keep the money coming in. But soon, those schools went dark too. The old man pulled the plug on the overseas expansion immediately. The focus shifted to getting the company listed. Zhu Pu's girlfriend worked in that field. So the moment Xiaoyu landed, she asked him to track down a consultant who knew the ropes. My sugar took her straight to an industry mixer. The consultant spotted Xiaoyu and swarmed right over, eyes full of hope, like sharks who smell blood in the water. Xiaoyu collected their business cards one by one. Then a sudden commotion caught everyone's attention. Heads turned all at once toward the same direction. All eyes landed on a guest who'd arrived fashionably late. He was in an all-white suit. The crystal chandelier light fell across his face, giving him a kind of calm, otherworldly beauty. The moment she saw him, Xiaoyu felt her breath stop. My Xuer leaned in and whispered, "You don't know who that is, do you?" "That's Su Zheng. He's kind of a big deal." My Xuer assumed Xiaoyu didn't know Su Zhou. So she started filling her in. Said he just come back from Wall Street. A triumph outcome, a real success. The brightest rising star around. Xiaoyu held her breath. Thought to herself, yeah, he really is something. Su Zheng just had that kind of light about him. The second he walked in, he became the center of everything. People gravitated toward him, falling over themselves to flatter him, all hoping to grab even a sliver of his attention. So many people were competing for Su Zheng's attention. More than he could handle. Naturally, Su Zheng had no idea Xiaoyu, someone he knew well, was standing in the corner of the room. Xiaoyu laughed at herself. 2 years ago, she felt invisible standing next to Su Zheng at parties like this. After 2 years of grinding, she felt like she'd made something of herself. But she still couldn't hold a candle to Su Zheng. He stood there, just as impressive as ever. The line of his profile was as clean and effortless as a single brushstroke. The chandelier light spilled over his perfect features, wrapping him in a glow that felt beyond this world. This was the face that had made Xiaoyu fall hard at first sight, the only one she'd ever wanted. Years later, seeing him again, still just as stunning. Xiaoyu's heart raced, but it came with a dull ache. Nothing like the giddy rush of the first time. This heartbeat was bitter, like a rusted gear being forced to turn again, grinding, painful. Xiaoyu pressed a hand to her chest and told Mishur it was a little stuffy in there, and she wanted to head home and rest. Mishur could see Xiaoyu wasn't doing well, so she drove her home. No longer. Xiaoyu took Mishur's advice and, from a handful of equally qualified consultants, picked the best-looking one. But she had him draft a proposal based on her own vision. At the final meeting, Xiaoyu proposed keeping only 1% of the shares for herself, with the remaining 10% distributed to shareholders through Xingxi Asset Management. That strategy beat out the new private equity firm's 11% stake. When the meeting rigged, the old man had already spotted the end goal. The 10% was held under Xingxi assets on paper. But the one actually pulling the strings was still Xiaoyu, so those shares were still in her hands. She'd played that hand beautifully. Had momentum on her side and was pulling ahead of the new private equity firm. But how to get the group listed smoothly in the short term, she had absolutely no idea where to start. Just then, Mishur reached out again, said she had a hot lead, and told her to come quick. Then dropped the location pin. When Xiaoyu arrived, a waitress in a kimono led her inside. Xiaoyu figured she'd be taken to a private dining room, but the waitress led her straight to the back courtyard. The back door opened onto a serene Japanese garden. Xiaoyu had been to this restaurant a few times and never knew there was a whole other world out back. The waitress slid open the lattice door and invited Xiaoyu in. Xiaoyu stepped inside. Beneath the carved wooden beam sat a man with striking, almost painted features. The small world. Her ex was right around the corner. Xiaoyu almost blurted out, "Shang." The moment she caught herself, she swallowed those words right back down. She put on her cool executive face and said in a perfectly neutral tone to Mr. Su. At the words, "Mr. Su," Su Zhang straightened up slightly and slowly rose to his feet. He extended his hand toward Xiaoyu and said, "Kagongji, I've heard a lot about you." At the title Xingangji, Xiaoyu felt a little dazed herself. In the business world, the new private equity firm had already claimed the title of President Ji, so everyone knew better than to call Xiaoyu that. Over time, people started calling her Xingangji instead. But hearing those words in Su Zheng's cool, detached tone gave them a whole different weight. Just then, Maishu stood up from beside them with a big smile, told them both to drop the formalities and sit down and eat. Incense was burning in the room, a clean, pure sandalwood scent, but having something that strong going while eating wasn't exactly pleasant. Xiaoyu felt it was messing with her palate and taking away from the food, but she didn't say anything. She just furrowed her brow slightly. Su Zhang seemed to notice that Xiaoyu was uncomfortable. He asked if the food wasn't to his liking. Xiaoyu froze. He couldn't believe what he just heard. Su Zhang said, "You don't look too happy about it." Hearing that, Xiaoyu was completely stunned. He never thought Su Zhang could pick up on even that. Was Wall Street really that cutthroat? That ruthless? To read the room, Xiaoyu shook his head and forced a small smile. He barely got out, "Mr. Sir," before Su Zhang cut him off. Su Zhang said, "Don't be so formal. Just call me by my name. People close to me call me Zhongge." Xiaoyu hesitated. Zhongge just wouldn't come out. Monsieur though lit up like she just won the lottery. Zhongge. Su Zhang heard that and flatly told her not to call him that. We're about close. His face was still that same expressionless robot look. Xiaoyu cleared his throat, then tried to lighten the mood by asking how the two of them ended up having lunch together and why they invited him along. Monsieur quickly shook off the awkwardness and started chattering away again, saying she'd volunteered to do an interview piece on Mr. Su. He agreed, and apparently Mr. Su is really interested in the Yushu group. He even mentioned wanting to, so she figured she'd introduce the two of them. Xiaoyu felt a wave of embarrassment, but he kept it all inside. On the surface he stayed completely calm. He put on his best business smile and said to Su Zhang, "Oh really, what a coincidence. We really appreciate the interest, Mr. Sixiao. But at this stage, our group's financial situation is actually in great shape, and the board isn't looking to bring in any outside investors right now." Su Zhang listened and gave a slight nod. Knowing Su Zhang the way he did, Xiaoyu had half expected that with Su Zhang's blunt personality, he just called out the Yushu group on its real financial state right then and there. Said nothing. He didn't expose Xiaoyu at all, just a quiet nod. Monsieur sensed the weird tension. They could just get to know each other first. Su Zhang nodded earnestly and handed Xiaoyu his business card with both hands. Xiaoyu played it like they never met, and Su Zhang went right along with the act. That too caught Xiaoyu completely off guard. They'd been together for years. He thought he knew Su Zhang inside and out, but seeing him again today, every move Su Zhang made, every reaction, was totally unexpected. It was like he was a completely different person. After lunch, Xiaoyu and Monsieur got in the car. Xiaoyu glanced in the rearview mirror and could still see Su Zhang standing stiffly on the curb, not doing much of anything, completely zoned out. Xiaoyu thought to himself, this guy's off doing math problems in his head again, isn't he? That stiff robotic look of his was almost funny, yet it suddenly made Xiaoyu feel a warm rush of fondness. This coolest stiff version of Su was the Su Zhang he actually knew. Early the next morning, Xingmiu came rushing into Xiaoyu's office. First thing through the door, she asked, did Su Zhang come looking for him? Xiaoyu waved her off and told her to relax. He'd grown up. He turned him down. Xingmu looked puzzled and asked why he turned him down. Didn't he want to invest in Yushu? You got a problem with money? Xiaoyu was at a loss for words. He just said the money doesn't come for free. Besides, weren't you against me getting involved with Su Zhang in the first place? But Xingmiu said she wasn't against it anymore. She said he could string Su Zhang along, squeeze every last drop of value out of him, then kick him to the curb. What's wrong with that? Xiaoyu utterly speechless waved her off and made up an excuse to get out of there. He just couldn't keep this conversation going, because no matter what he said. After leaving his mom's office, Xiaoyu checked the time. It was noon, so he headed to the restaurant by himself. The place was right near Yushu, and the food was exactly to Xiaoyu's taste. So, whenever he was working at headquarters, he almost always ended up eating there. It was a members-only restaurant, so outsiders rarely came by. Xiaoyu sat down at the table without much thought. He looked up and saw David and Ruilei walk in, talking about something, with a hint of worry on their faces. Both of them froze when their eyes met Xiaoyu's. Xiaoyu had no intention of wasting his time on either of them, so he looked back down at his menu. David, though, took that as a sign of weakness and walked right over. He asked without any hesitation, is anyone sitting across from you? He said with a cold smirk that no, it was reserved. David's face stiffened. He pushed through it and asked, do you ever regret breaking up with Su Zhong? How you hadn't expected David to bring it up out of nowhere. He frowned and said, what does that have to do with you? Xiaoyu had no interest in talking to him and looked back at his menu. David just kept going anyway, talking to himself. Right then, a waiter came over and handed Xiaoyu a note, saying it was from a gentleman in a private dining room who was requesting that she join him. Xiaoyu unfolded the note and read it. It said regarding the shell acquisition. Xiaoyu stood up immediately and asked the waiter, which room? Without even glancing at David, Xiaoyu followed the waiter to the private dining room. The waiter led Xiaoyu to a private dining room. He pushed open, and this sat Su Zhong. Xiaoyu was briefly called up, but not surprised. If anything, it felt like, of course it's you. Xiaoyu wasn't one to beat around the bush, so he got straight to the point and asked Su Zhong about the reverse merger, wanting his take as a professional. Su Zhong seemed perfectly comfortable with the no-nonsense approach, and said that compared to a traditional IPO, a reverse merger falls way short. I wouldn't go the reverse merger. He tells Su Zhong that his company couldn't afford to wait it out, saying, didn't you just tell me your company's cash flow was in great shape when it wasn't an issue? So how can you not afford to wait? That stopped Xiaoyu cold. He thought, I can hardly admit I was just talking big last time. His expression picked up on the shift. Xiaoyu looked at him like he just heard the most unbelievable thing. Was that joke not funny? Su Zhong's face felt like he just failed the test. He said, sorry, he was still working on it. Then he actually pulled out a notebook like he was about to take notes. Don't ask Xiaoyu in all seriousness where exactly did that joke go wrong. 下来我记得我Xiaoyu 咬得给他老夸不呐，妈耶！ And said a little bit leaning closer, asking what specifically felt offensive to him. 阿红可以 elaborate. Watching Su Zhang inch toward him, so he felt his face go to red. He instinctively leaned back, saying he couldn't really put his finger on it. But instead of dropping it, Su Zhang just gave him a multiple choice question to pick from. Something about that felt so familiar it made Xiao Yu smile without even thinking. Xiao Yu told Su Zhang, you really don't have to do all this. That cool detection you had going before was fine. Just be whatever feels natural to you. Su Zhang tilted his head and said, but didn't you say you didn't like that? He looked just like a golden retriever watching its owner. Almost blurting out that he actually did like it. But caught himself just in time. He cleared his throat and said, let's get back to business. You said you don't recommend the reverse merge. Are there other reasons? Su Zhang Penninghand looked at him seriously and asked, that abrupt subject change just now. Or did I say something that made you uncomfortable? 就点头, hey, when it's obvious someone doesn't want to talk about something. So Shang nodded, taking the lesson to heart. Dutifully wrote it down. Xiao Yu watched him scribbling away with his head down. 抬起头 and felt a wave of God, this guy is adorable. He couldn't tell anymore if Su Zhang was actually that endearing, or if he was just way too far gone on him. Even now, seeing this different side of Su Zhang, Xiao Yu was still completely charmed by it. He thought, I am totally a goner when it comes to this guy. Finished his notes and looked up. He's saying, Harry R's merger carries real risk. You never really know what baggage comes with the shell company. That gave Xiao Yu a headache. But then So Song said his firm could invest directly in Yuzhou. Xiao Yu sighed, thinking, here we go with that again. And told Su Zhang he think about it. He stood up to leave, but Su Zhang quickly called after him, your eyes full of hope, asking if Xiao Yu could take him off the blocked list. 头说可以，但是那天Xiao Yu, he'd had Su Zhang blocked for something like 2 years. Looking at the expression on Su Zhang's face, Xiao nodded. That run-in at the restaurant with Su Zhang is just one of those things. But Zanxian, he started bumping into Su Zhang there again and again. At that point, it wasn't much of a coincidence anymore. Xiao Yu was a regular there. So his showing up made perfect sense. Su Zhang was another story. The financial district was a 15-minute drive away, and most people wouldn't go that far from the office just for lunch. But Xiao Yu decided not to dig into why Su Zhang kept turning up in that private room. Ufang good day after finishing lunch. So Xiao Yu had just gone back to Yunshou when he got a call from Zhang Fei. Zhe was the founder of Fayang Taken. The shell company Xinximu had picked, but since Xin Samu had stepped back from the IPO project, he'd handed things off directly to Xiao Yu and Zhang Feiyang. What nobody saw coming was that their biggest rival had also reached out to Zhang Feiyang. So Zhang Feiyang decided to jack up the price. The number was already beyond what Xiao Yu had budgeted for it, so he was on the fence. Realize, an idea came to him right away. He reached out to Ru Weilai for dinner, but David showed up to Ru Weilai was by David's side. But at the moment David saw Xiao Yu, he laid it on thick, and Cai Jun calling him a brilliant young talent, praising him for his sharp eye and good judgment. Yes, if the David who had talked down to Xiao Yu, just as David was going on about how great and affordable their shell company was, there was a knock at the private room door. They all assumed it was a server, but it was So Shang. Oh, he stepped over to see Xiao Yu and asked if he was interrupting. Heard Xiao Zhang say something so cordial and polished. Both Relay and David were floored. Xiao Yu, though, had gotten used to this new side of Su Zhong and didn't even blink. He just said, not at all, pull up a seat. Hearing Su Zhong say something so cordial and polished, both Relay and David were floored. Xiao Yu, though, had gotten used to this new side of Su Zhong. So Zhang walked in and took a seat. Xiao Yu felt an instant, natural sense of trust just looking at Su. He casually slid the documents across the table in front of Su and asked what he thought of the securities firm. So Zhang didn't even glance at the documents. He just kept his eyes fixed on Xiao Yu. That intense stare was enough to make anyone blush. Xiao Yu felt his throat go dry and had to look away. Ronglai and David, sitting across from them, felt like they'd come completely invisible. Su Zhang paused for a moment, then said the company's shell had been cleaned up early on. It was probably fine. But the securities firm itself, not so clean. David's big sunny smile instantly wilted. He said nervously, hey, you can't just throw accusations like that around. Only now did he bother to spare David a single glance. His voice ice cold as he said to them, if there's nothing else, you can go. So Zhang's frigid stare left David visibly shaken. But Ronglai pulled him away, and they slunk out of there. So Zhang turned back to Xiao Yu and said, don't you think you owe me a thank? You? Xiao Yu glanced at Su Zhang and said, even without your tip, I wasn't gonna buy a shell from those guys. I don't do business with people I don't trust. Zhang looked almost surprised, then asked Xiao Yu with a puzzled look, then why did you agree to meet with them? And said, I wanted to get a feel for the market, and maybe have a little fun messing with them. So Zhang immediately leaned in closer to Xiao Yu and asked with an almost desperate earnestness, then why didn't you call me? You could have picked my brain about the market, and had your fun messing with me too. Xiao Yu's back stiffened instantly. His face flushed red as he said, why on earth would I mess with you? Su Zhang promptly picked up his notebook and asked Xiao Yu with complete sincerity, tell me exactly what you find boring about me. Over the years, how you had picked up bits and pieces about Su Zhang from people around him and online. The Su Zhang everyone talked about wore white suits, worked alone, and showed no mercy. That's why the industry called him the Great White Shark. But right now, Su Zhang looked completely wide-eyed and innocent, practically wearing a sign on his forehead. Please take advantage of me. Xiao Yu thought, is this really the infamous Great White Shark everyone talks about? Like a big golden retriever. Feeling Su Zhang's gaze still locked on him, Xiao Yu turned his face away. After wrapping up his talk with Su Zhang, Xiao Yu had to admit Su Zhang was a sharp investor, but not someone who threw money around carelessly. If he wanted to invest in Yuzhou, there had to be something in it for him. Letting him invest isn't begging for his money. It's helping him make money. So why am I letting my ego get in the way? Afraid that taking his money means I'm beneath him. With that settled in his mind, he agreed to Su Zhong's proposal. At the board meeting, Xiao Yu laid out two main issues. Driving the acquisition cost way over budget. Second, M Global had expressed interest in investing, which would not only ease the group's cash crunch, but also help Yu list on the US exchange. When Xiao Yu finished, Uncle Xin was the first one to push back. The other board members were also worried that an outsider would take their money and swallow the whole company whole. Xiao Yu was quiet for a moment, then asked, based on Xiao Yu's estimates, what would our market cap look like after the shell listing? Xin Simo answered casually, about 10 billion. Xiao Yu smiled and told them, according to M Global, if we list in the US, they're confident they can push our market cap to 15 billion. The moment those words landed, the whole room was stunned. Did anyone still care that M Global was an outsider? Forget outsider. At this point, they wouldn't care if it was aliens. Still, Uncle Xin dug in his heels and rallied a few of the uncles to keep pushing back. Xiao Yu never expected to win everyone over in one shot, but he knew nobody could resist the pull of money forever. The group needed cash, and Su Zhong had it. It was only a matter of time before he had the majority on his side. Meanwhile, the Xin family investment management company was all set up, and originally he'd only created it as a vehicle to distribute dividends to the family. But barely after he got the company off the ground, an old classmate showed up at his door, asking if he was getting into investment. Why not invest in yourself? Xiao Yu had been about this is just a shell company I set up to handle dividends. But the moment he heard the word, Su Zhong's face suddenly flashed in his mind, and before he knew it, he heard himself say, go ahead, I'm listening. Hearing that, his old classmate was absolutely and treated him like royalty, personally inviting Xiao Yu to come check out his studio. The classmate was in mobile game development. Xiao Yu tried the game out for a bit and thought it was pretty fun, just a little rough on the edges. His classmate said, rough is just the reality when you're broke. Who wouldn't want to polish it up if they had the money? Xiao Yu found it amusing and asked how much more he needed. His classmate said, 2 million. Xiao Yu felt a pang of sympathy, then gestured to Su Zhong beside him, saying he didn't know much about investing himself, so he brought a friend along to take a look. Su Zhong went straight to the point. You showed 5 million, right? Su Zhong acted like he hadn't heard a word of that, and said, if you're going to do this, I'm putting in 20 million. Make it count. His classmate was so moved he teared up, dropped to his knees in front of Su Zhong in excitement, and said, you are truly a saint. Mr. Su. Su Zhong was caught off guard and asked how he knew his last name. His classmate said sheepishly, I saw it trending today. Xiao Yu quickly grabbed his phone, and sure enough, Su Zhong was all over the trending topics. Turns out Meishu's interview had just dropped. Meishu was a financial journalist, but she played the social media game hard, so her headlines always hit like a bombshell. The subtitle of this feature read, M Global President Su Zhong. My biggest regret is coming to Wall Street. Even with billions in the bank, I'm not happy. Anyway, Su Zhong had gone viral because of that beans and still miserable. His looks and presence only poured more fuel on the fire. Xu Shi's article racked up views like crazy, and she was on cloud 9 for days. She even called Xiao Yu to thank him personally, and invited him to join her at a party for drinks. Xiao Yu took her up on it, and at the party, he ran into Su Zhong again. Not that it was too surprising. This was an industry event, after all. What did catch Xiao Yu off guard, though, was seeing Thomas and Lilith standing next to Su Zhong. Thomas, he could understand. He was Su Zhong's assistant, so tagging along to Asia made sense. But Lilith... But the buzz from the drinks faded in an instant. He turned away quietly and walked out to the balcony alone to get some air. Xiao Yu had barely been on the balcony a few minutes when she heard a voice behind her. She turned around and saw Li. Xiao Yu frowned, clearly annoyed. She made a show of being polite and asked why Li was lagging. Li Lixi said with a smile, Su Zhong is taking over as president of the Asia-Pacific region, so of course I came along. We're close, after all. Xiao Yu gave a cold smirk. Oh really? Then why after 2 years haven't you locked him down? Is it you, or is it him? Li Lixi's face went stiff for a split second, but she quickly put on a wounded expression. She said to Xiao, are you misreading this? He and I are just best friends. Before Li Lixi could even finish, Xiao Yu waved her off and said, say good. I couldn't care less. Do whatever you want. I'm done with him anyway. The words had barely left her mouth when Su Zhong's voice came from the doorway, repeating the last few words Xiao Yu had just said. You're done with me. Xiao Yu turned toward his voice, and saw Su Zhong in the white butt, down, looking sharp. But his face showed a vulnerability and confusion that didn't match his polished look at all. Faced with this awkward situation, Xiao Yu looked away without a word, and walked off. Li Lixi put on her best helpless act, trying to explain herself to Su Zhong, but Su Zhong looked right through her, and took off in the direction Xiao Yu had gone, leaving Li Lixi standing there awkwardly. Xiao Yu had just reached the parking lot, when Su Zhong came running up from behind and grabbed her arm. He still had that same wounded look, asking where she was going. His tone was just as lost as when he said she was done with him. Xiao Yu stared at him, genuinely surprised. It seemed like when she got upset, Su Zhong actually chasing after her was a first. Xiao Yu pulled her hand free, turned away and said, I'm heading home. Seeing she was about to drive herself, Su Zhong stepped in front of her and said, you've been drinking, you can't drive. Xiao Yu realized he was right and said, fine, can you give me a ride? Su Zhong led Xiao Yu to his car and headed straight toward her place like he'd done it 100 times. Xiao Yu started to wonder if Su Zhong had been keeping tabs on her. Because how else could he keep running into and know exactly where she lived? The thought sent a chill down her spine. And she rubbed her arm. Su Zhang noticed and asked, cold. Xiao Yu gave a slight nod, though she wasn't even surprised anymore. That Su Zhang could read her. Su Zhang reached into the storage compartment and pulled out a cashmere blanket and handed it to her. The moment she saw it, Xiao Yu froze. It was the blanket she used to love so much. She used to wrap herself in it and curl up with Su Zhang on the couch watching TV. But that blanket should have been back at the place they used to share. What was it doing here? Ever since she'd made up her mind to break up with Su Zhou, she'd never gone back. She wrapped herself in the blanket and asked him, this thing is so warm. Why haven't you thrown it away? Su Zhang didn't seem surprised at all. You just said it's yours, so I kept it. Xiao Yu turned her head with a hint of attitude and asked, did you ever let Lisa use it? Su Zhang seemed genuinely puzzled and asked why he would give it to her. Xiao Yu couldn't hold her emotions back and said with a bit of an edge, she gets cold too, you know. Su Zhang confused said, why is that my problem? Xiao Yu was at a loss for words, but somehow that irritated feeling in her chest just faded away. Su Zhang dropped Xiao Yu off at her building. She was about to get out of the car when she heard Su Zhang. Everything from before is still there. If you want anything, you can come back for it. Xiao Yu was caught off guard and said with a restless heart, there's nothing I want. Su Zhang looked at her with that same pitiful expression and said, right, you don't even want me anymore. Xiao Yu 犯的叛逆, but pretended not to hear it, pushed the door open and got out. Su Zhang got out of the car too and called out to her a minute. But nobody believes me. His voice was full of anguish. When Xiao Yu couldn't help but turn back and ask, mean what? Su Zhang looked at her with eyes that were darker and deeper than the night sky behind the streetlight. He placed his hand over his heart and said, the biggest regret of my life was going to Wall Street. No matter what I got out of it, I've never felt right. Su Zhang's eyes were like a whirlpool, threatening to pull Xiao Yu into somewhere deep and inescapable. It scared her. She knew she should turn around and run, put as much distance between them as possible. But the pull of that whirlpool had already taken hold, rooting her feet firmly to the ground. She was almost spellbound, and she asked the one question she had no business asking. Why? Maybe that should have been the very first thing said when they ran into each other again. Xiao Yu's mind was bursting with questions. She wanted to ask Su Zhang why he came back, why he changed, why he kept trying to get close to her. Every single one of those questions pointed vaguely but unmistakably to an answer that made her heart race. Su Zhang wanted to get back together. Su Zhang walked over quickly, took her hand, and said with total sincerity, because I want to be with you. His voice was quiet, but in the stillness of the night, it rang out loud and clear. So loud it shook Xiao Yu to her core. But hearing him say that, Xiao Yu stepped back and said, that's not going to happen. Su Zhang looked at her with disappointment and asked, why can't we be together? Xiao Yu took a calm breath and said, because everyone thinks I'm not good enough for you. And honestly, I think you feel the same way. Su Zhang was figuring and said that was never how he felt. Xiao Yu shook her head with a sad smile. Said, you probably never noticed, but when we were together, you were always checked out. I was the one constantly chasing after you, and I'm tired of that. Su Zhang paused and nodded slowly and said, then we won't do it like that anymore. This time I'll be the one chasing after you. Xiao Yu stood there stunned, still processing it, when Su Zhang opened his arms and said, can I help you? Xiao Yu instinctively shook her head, but when she caught a flash of hurt in his eyes, her resolve softened a little. Then Su Zhang turned it around and asked, then can you help me? Xiao Yu never imagined Su Zhang would ever say something like that. She was completely thrown for a moment, and feeling a bit soft, hearted, she loosely put an arm around his shoulder, then started to pull away. But just as she was letting go, Su Zhang pulled her in tight. His arms locked around her slender waist like a vice, squeezing the breath right out of her. Lost in the embrace, Xiao Yu realized something was off. And said, let go. Su Zhang immediately let her go. Xiao Yu asked him, why are you holding on so tight? Because I'm chasing after you. Xiao Yu had absolutely nothing to say to that. While the two of them were talking and embracing, someone behind them was quietly recording it all on their phone. The next day, photos of the two of them hit the internet. Xiao Yu got a taste of what it's like to go viral. But then the follow-up leaks came fast, with rumors that Su Zhang and Xiao Yu had been living together for years. With the company about to go public, a scandal like this was the last thing anyone needed. Group called an emergency meeting to deal with the fallout. The new uncle-in-law had never liked Xiao Yu, so he took the lead in going on the attack, tearing into Xiao Yu and his mother for their scandalous personal, and dragging the company's reputation through the mud right before the IPO. The usual board wasn't like most boards though. Everyone was connected by blood or marriage, so they tended to keep things personal. Nobody wanted to come out swinging right away. He brought up how Xiao Yu had lobbied everyone to M Global's investment. Why didn't you mention the boss of M Global was your ex? Xiao Yu raised an eyebrow and said he wasn't his ex. They had been broken up for a long time. As everyone kept going back and forth, the old patriarch finally spoke. He said the company was in the hot seat right now, with everyone watching their every move. He told Xiao Yu to think about the bigger picture, step back so Xiaomu could take over. Hearing the old man say that, Xiao Yu went pale. Xing Qimu was back in charge, and he was riding high. Xiao Yu couldn't help but ask him whether he was the one who had those photos taken. Xing Qimu neither confirmed nor denied. He just said if you leave the door open in trouble, people in education have to watch how they live their lives. You never should have been so reckless from the start. Hearing Xing Qimu say that, it all clicked for Xiao Yu. His and Xinglu's private life had always been a card Xing was holding in his back pocket. He had just been waiting for the right moment to play it. Xing went on, back when we had that proposal showdown, I lost. But the old man gave me a tip, said I lost because I didn't know how to work the family. But now, you're getting pushed out for the exact same reason. No family back. That's just how things work around here. It became clearer and clearer. Why Su Zhang and every other professional had always said that Yu Ju had to break free from all the family problems if it ever wanted to go further. Xiao Yu had taken a hard fall from the top, but at least now he saw everything clearly. After going through all the, Xiao Yu finally made peace with it. Whoever was in charge of Yu Ju right now was the one with a target on their back. That person was going to take the hit. So he decided to go to the States to get his MBA. He immediately put in a transfer and he headed back to the US headquarters in 6 months. 6 months, Xiao Yu threw himself into studying, writing his application essays, and prepping for interviews. During that time, Su Zhong kept trying to win Xiao Yu over, but every attempt got shot down. But since he'd made up his mind to keep at it, he wasn't about to quit. 6 months, Xiao Yu got into the MBA program at H Business School and enrolled right on track. And Su Zhong made it back to the US headquarters without a hitch. The only catch was that M Global's headquarters was in Manhattan, while Xiao Yu's school H Business School was up in Boston, so they were still a bit far apart. But the distance wasn't really a big deal. Whenever Su Zhong had a free moment, he'd make the trip up to Boston to see, just like Xiao Yu used to do back in the day. When he spotted Su Zhong standing outside the dorm, he felt a strange sense. It brought back memories of his younger son, of that giddy, butterflies in your stomach feeling he used to get rushing to Boston every weekend. Seeing Su Zhong there, Xiao Yu casually asked him what brought him all the way here. Su Zhong caught the concern in Xiao Yu's voice and told him honestly that he'd flown in on a private jet. It was quick. Here and that, Xiao Yu's sympathy pretty much evaporated on the spot. Back in the day, he had driven himself the whole way. How come Su Zhong got to have it so easy? Xiao Yu shot him a look that said he had nothing to say and turned to walk away. Su Zhong had no idea why Xiao Yu was annoyed, so he quickly called out to him. Feiyu Mobile hit it big. Feiyu Mobile was the mobile gaming company run by Xiao Yu's old classmate. Well, the moment he said that, Xiao Yu's attention snapped right back. Su Zhong had learned that when he ran out of things to say, bringing up investments always worked. That was guaranteed to get Xiao Yu interested. But the fact that Xiao Yu cared more about money than about left Su Zhong feeling pretty helpless. Another week went by. Xiao Yu had been swamped with coursework late. He just wrapped up class and had a group study session coming right up. He pulled out his phone and shot Su Zhong a text, saying he was slammed, and told him not to come. But Su Zhong replied right away. He was already there. You're looking at Su Zhong's message. Xiao Yu realized he'd kind of gotten used to it lately, spending weekends with Su Zhong, and that was not a good sign. So he steeled himself and texted Su Zhong, telling him to find something to do on his own. He didn't have time to hide. Xiao Yu shoved his phone back in his pocket and made up his mind to ignore him completely. But right in the middle of the group session, a familiar silhouette just outside the window. His stomach dropped. He tried to act like he had no, but then he thought about the weather outside and just couldn't bring himself to look away. It was snowing, and it was freezing out there. Su Zhong was in a deep brown cashmere coat. A light dusting of snow, his cheeks faintly paled, making this tall, broad-shouldered man look almost fragile. In that situation, Xiao Yu just couldn't bring herself to be heartless. She opened the door and let Su Zhong in first. Xiao Yu handed him a cup of hot tea. In that moment, the scene felt oddly familiar to her. Back in the day, she used to stand out in the cold on purpose, just to get Su Zhong's attention. She only narrowed her eyes and studied. He was just sitting there like a good little puppy, holding his tea. Su Zhong sat quietly on the couch. Xiao Yu went back to the group discussion. Things got heated pretty fast, and everyone pretty much forgot he was even there in the corner. Just as they were wrapping up, Su Zhong spoke up. He asked if he could share a suggestion. One classmate who'd been a senior executive at Su Zhong said he knew a little. He walked right over and laid out his thoughts. Nobody expected that Su Zhong's command of the technical job would instantly win over the rest of the group. Everyone's attitude toward him shifted on the spot. They eagerly started asking where he went to school and where he worked. Xiao Yu was worried they'd never stop asking. A lot of people in MBA programs are there purely to network and work their connections. If they found out who Su Zhong really was, they'd be all over him trying to climb the ladder. Xiao Yu quickly cut in and told everyone to stop chatting and get back to fixing the deck. The others got the hint and dropped it. With Su Zhong's help, the slides and talking points came together fast. Then they all headed out to grab dinner. Right before they left, Xiao Yu pulled Su Zhong aside quietly and told her, not to mention he was a senior managing partner at M Global. It only caused headaches. Su Zhong didn't quite get what the big deal was. But since Xiao Yu asked, he agreed without any fuss. Sure enough, once they sat down at the restaurant, a nosy classmate brought it up again and asked Su Zhong where he worked. Su Zhong just said he was at M Global. Everyone started buzzing about it, talking over each other, until the topic finally died out in a flurry of compliments. After they get together, a few of them looked up Su Zhong and M Global. They immediately discovered he was a billionaire. After that, they latched onto Xiao Yu even more. It drove her absolutely crazy. Thankfully, the semester ended pretty quickly. Xiao Yu moved out of the dorms and rented an apartment near campus. Around that time back home, the usual group ran into serious trouble. Samuel sit down, Jin Sim spent $300 million to acquire a shell company, Feiyang Tech, planning to go public through a backdoor listing. Things were moving along smoothly, but right after they got the green light from the securities regulator and everything seemed on track, Tech dropped a bombshell. 200 million in hidden debt. The shock blindsided Yuzhou completely. Even the old man publicly called out Xing Ximu for it. After rounds of arguments, with Xing Ximu pouring fuel on the fire, the board started remembering how good things were with Xu. They'd completely forgotten how they pushed her out in the first place. On her day off, Xiaoyu was lounging on the couch, enjoying a rare break, playing a mobile game on her phone. Who would have thought that little indie studio she'd blindly invested in back then? It was actually out, earning the mighty Yuzhou Group. After playing for a bit, Su Zhong sent her a message, saying he was downstairs and needed to talk. Then her phone started ringing. She texted Su Zhong back, saying to give her a minute. Then she picked up the video call. The old man put on a warm act, asking about her studies and how she was doing before finally getting to the point. Xiaoyu had already heard about the situation from Xing Ximu, so she'd exactly surprised. The old man put on his kindly grandfather and said the whole thing had been unfair to her. Now that the dust had settled, he wanted her to come back. Hearing that, Xiaoyu honestly had to hand it to him. He basically needed her to come back and clean up a mess. Yet he framed it as the company graciously letting her past mistakes slide. Now he was doing her a big favor by offering her the CEO seat back. Real generous of him. Xiaoyu just smiled and said she couldn't. She still had a year left in her MBA program. The old man had expected her to come running back with her tail wagging, so he hadn't expected her to turn him down and play hardball. He wasn't happy about it. After all these years, he was used to everyone in the family bowing to him. He tried a different angle, saying the company couldn't wait a whole year for her. Besides, this project was her baby from the start. Didn't she want to be the one to see it through? Did she really want someone else to walk away with all the credit? Xiaoyu paused for a moment, then cut straight to it and offered him a solution. Let M Global handle the restructuring and take the company public. After the failed backdoor listing, the old man was actually more open to her idea this time, but he still looked hesitant and said the board was against outside investment. Xiaoyu wasn't buying it, since when was it really the board's call? Everyone on that board just followed the old man's lead anyway. To put his mind at ease, Xiaoyu said, I know what the board is worried about. They think I'm going to make a power grab. I'll keep my 1% equity stake and not take a single share more. The old man relaxed a little hearing that. He said he trusted her, but he didn't offer her any additional shares, effectively locking her in at that 1%. After hanging up, Xiaoyu let out a breath, as if she'd known all along it would go exactly this way. She went to shower, and by the time she was done, Xing Ximu was already Xiaoyu had left. She'd done it cleanly, and the handoff to Xing Ximu had been smooth, without leaving any loose ends. Now that the situation had flipped, Xing Ximu was willing to hand things back gracefully. But Xiaoyu wasn't in any rush. She said she still had school to finish, and they could figure it out when break came. Then she gave Xing Ximu a piece of advice. The relatives couldn't actually sway what happened in the end. When it came down to it, the only thing that mattered was keeping the old man on your side. Then she hung up without another word. After spending so long on video calls with the Xing family, Xiaoyu lay back on the bed feeling like she was forgetting something. Then it hit her. Su Zhong was still waiting downstairs. Xiaoyu hurried to get dressed. As she did, she thought about how it had snowed just last night. It was going to be freezing today. Knowing how stubborn Su Zhong was, he'd never duck into a convenience store to warm up. He'd be standing outside like an idiot right out in the open where everyone could see him. Probably terrified she wouldn't spot him when she came downstairs. Xiaoyu put on her coat and headed down. The moment she stepped outside, she froze. There was a flash of bright red in the middle of the plaza. Su Zhong was standing under a street lamp decked out in a Santa Claus costume. He'd even committed to the bit with a thick, fake-looking white beard on his face. Xiaoyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry as she asked him what on earth he was doing. Su Zhong, cheeks red from the cold, stayed fully in character and said, Merry Christmas. It was only then that Xiaoyu remembered. Today was Christmas. She rubbed her nose a little embarrassed. She asked Su Zhong why he dressed up as Santa. Su Zhong said, Don't you love Christmas? I wanted to get into the holiday spirit for you. Xiaoyu was caught off guard. She looked at him confused. Who told you I love Christmas? Su Zhong said, You used to be all about it. Whenever we were in the same city, you dragged me out to celebrate properly. The truth was Xiaoyu didn't actually love Christmas. She loved being with Su Zhong, but she'd always felt like she had to hold back around him, too afraid to interrupt his work. Christmas was just a convenient excuse to take up his time. She could use the holiday as a reason to rope him into decorating the Christmas tree together. Strolling arm in arm down streets lit up with neon lights, and flat out demand that he block off the whole day just for her. Valentine's Day and Chinese New Year worked the same way. If it weren't for holidays, Su Zhong would never have made time for her. Thinking back on all of it, Xiaoyu felt her eyes sting. She asked him, Why couldn't you have treated me like this back then? Zhong looked quiet for a moment. He was oblivious, honestly. He never even realized he'd been treating her badly. He suddenly looked like a kid who knew he'd done something wrong, and asked Xiaoyu, Is it too late for me to make it up to you now? Xiaoyu looked away and said, Yeah, it was pretty late. Su Zhong stood there for a long moment, then finally said, Then I'll just have to make it up to you twice as much. Xiaoyu refused to look at him, and forced a cold tone into her voice. Being persistent isn't going to work. I'm not getting back together with you. Hearing that, Su Zhong said carefully, Okay, that's fine. Don't be upset. Xiaoyu turned to look at her. His eyes, the only thing visible above the fake beard, were full of helpless confusion. He had the look of a kid who got a math problem wrong and had no idea why he was being scolded. He could sense he'd done something wrong, but couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. All he could do was stare up at her, anxious and guilty. Xiaoyu had no idea what to do with him when he got like this. She caved almost immediately, but had no clue how to keep the conversation going. So she just told him to come upstairs and warm up. The two of them headed back inside. Su Zhang still wearing that ridiculous Santa outfit. He dressed up like that, just to make Xiaoyu happy. It had clearly backfired. Xiaoyu wasn't happy at all. Xiaoyu poured Su Zhang a glass of and sat down beside him. She felt the awkwardness too, so she opened her mouth and changed the subject. She asked him how the Yushu IPO was coming along. Su Zhang paused for a second, then quickly shifted back into work mode. The two of them talked through the listing for a while, and Xiaoyu thought she should call back home to fill Xi Miyun on everything. While she was looking around, her top slipped off her shoulder. The neckline was way too wide. Su Zhang caught a glimpse of Xiaoyu's bare shoulder and found himself leaning toward her without thinking. Right at that moment, Xiaoyu turned to ask if she could borrow his phone. Suddenly, their faces were inches apart. Xiaoyu snapped back to her senses and instinctively pulled away. Su Zhang cleared his throat awkwardly, then handed his phone to Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu called her own number and heard it ringing somewhere in the couch. She dug it out from between the cushions. She went to hang up, but her finger slipped and accidentally landed on the call log. She glanced down and felt a quiet jolt. She was looking at Su Zhang's outgoing call history. Over the 2 years they'd been apart, Su Zhang had called Xiaoyu at least several hundred times. None of them went through, of course. He'd been blocked. Something tugged at Xiaoyu's heart, but she played it cool, quickly navigated back to the home screen and handed the phone back to Su Zhang. Since M Global was partnering with Su Zhang's company, Xiaoyu started having work interactions with Su Zhang. Xiaoyu even made a trip to the M Global office in Manhattan. When Xiaoyu arrived downstairs at the building, Su Zhang's assistant Thomas came down to meet her. Xiaoyu joked with him, "How come Lilith isn't here? Weren't you two always together before?" Thomas's expression shifted slightly. He said, Xiaoyu asked him again, now that Su Zhang had been transferred back to the States. Why hadn't she come back with him? Thomas said he wasn't sure. But he mentioned that over the past few years, Lilith had always been trying to get closer to his boss. But Su Zhang never paid her any attention. He also said his boss was incredibly driven at work, but basically lived and breathed spreadsheets. After Xiaoyu had left, Su Zhang had been in ongoing therapy and never stopped. The moment Xiaoyu heard the word therapy, her expression turned serious. Thomas looked visibly upset. He said, "I've always been the one booking his appointments, but beyond that I don't really know the details. I can just tell it has something to do with you." Hearing that, Xiaoyu fell into deep thought. Later, while reviewing documents in Su Zhang's office, she couldn't stop thinking about him seeing a therapist. They'd been reunited for almost a year now, and during that time, Su Zhang had clearly seemed more fragile than before, sometimes even making Xiaoyu feel a pang of tenderness toward him. But she had never considered that he might be dealing with a real psychological issue. Xiaoyu had noticed that in private, Su Zhang had become more attuned to her emotions. But at the same time, he also got hurt more easily. While Xiaoyu was lost in thought, Su Zhang sat down beside her and asked what was wrong. Xiaoyu couldn't hold back and asked him, "Are you in therapy?" Su Zhang looked a little surprised and asked her who told her. Then she instinctively grabbed Su Zhang's arm and asked if he'd started seeing a therapist because of her. Su Zhang answered honestly, "Yes." Xiaoyu's chest tightened. She let go of Su Zhang's arm and instinctively felt a wave of guilt, murmuring, "I'm sorry." Seeing Xiaoyu's low mood, Xu Zhang said, "You don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong." But Xiaoyu still said quietly, full of guilt, "Still, it's because of me." Su Zhang took her hand and said, "I should actually be thanking you. I started therapy to work on my social issues. The problem existed long before I met you, but I always avoided dealing with it. You're the reason I chose to face it and do something about it." Hearing that, Xiaoyu couldn't deny it. The guilt weighing on her did ease up quite a bit. Still, she kept her brow furrowed. She asked Su Zhang why he hadn't sought help sooner. Su Zhang thought it over for a moment before finding the right words. "I guess I was just scared of how hard it would be." Xiaoyu was caught off guard hearing that from him. Su Zhang nodded and continued, "Everything has always come easy to me. I've never struggled in academics, never hit a wall, except when it comes to people. My emotional intelligence is just really low. Learning how to socialize is exhausting for me. I still find it incredibly hard. Things that come so naturally to everyone else, I just can't do them. Sometimes I honestly wonder if there's something wrong with me." The more he said, the more heartbreaking it got. Xiaoyu saw it again, a crack of vulnerability breaking through Su Zhang's usual icy exterior. Xiaoyu started to wonder, had she been too hard on him, holding him to a normal person's social standards? Then out of nowhere, Su Zhang straightened up and said with quiet confidence, "But I'll keep trying." He looked at Xiaoyu with a touch of sadness and said, "Don't give up on me. I can do better." Xiaoyu's heart clenched. Her voice came out much softer. "I'm not giving up on you." Hearing that, Su Zhang let out a breath of relief. But the moment those words left her mouth, Xiaoyu felt her cheeks flush. Then something else seemed to cross Xiaoyu's mind. She hesitated for a while before asking Su Zhang whether he knew that Lilith had followed him to the Asia branch. Su Zhang thought for a second and said he did mention it. Xiaoyu asked him with a hint of exasperation, "Did you know Lilith had a crush on you? And that she had a serious problem with me?" And asked Xiaoyu why she never told him. With that a loss for words, after a long pause she said, "Because I always figured you just know without me having to say it." Su Zhang said, a little frustrated, I really didn't know. I don't pick up on that stuff. Xiao Yu shook her head. Forget it. It doesn't even matter anymore. But then Su Zhang said, well, I feel like you don't really know me either. Do you know what I like most? Xiao Yu frowned. Su Zhang gently pressed her back against the couch and said, dead serious. You're my favorite. It was like a current shot through Xiao Yu, leaving her facing a flustered, pink-cheeked Xiao Yu. Su Zhang said, see, you didn't know. Does that mean you don't care about me? That you don't like me enough to know me? It just means I never said it out loud. Su Zhang leaned closer to Xiao Yu and said, I'll tell you more about what I'm thinking from now on. I hope you'll do the same. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. Xiao Yu felt her resolve quietly beginning to soften and murmured. But then Su Zhang glanced at his watch and said, my afternoon appointment is up. I have a client to meet. If there's nothing else, you should head out. And just like that, every bit of Xiao Yu's softened mood vanished into thin air. After Su Zhang wrapped up with the guests, he finished his business and decided to handle something personal. He noticed that Xiao Yu wasn't a fan of Lilisi, so Su Zhang figured he'd just take over the Yuzu account himself going forward. He'd probably be heading to Asia pretty often anyway. If Lilisi was there, Xiao Yu would be unhappy. So Su Zhang called the big boss and said he didn't want to work with Lilisi anymore, asked the company to reassign her. What he didn't expect was that the big boss just fired Lilisi on the spot. Su Zhang had no idea any of this had happened. He headed to his usual cafe, and the moment he looked up, he saw Lilisi, looking like a rat, walking straight toward him. Lilisi confronted him with tears in her eyes, demanding to know why he had gotten her fired. Su Zhang said calmly, he never told the company to fire her. He just said he didn't want to work with her. Lilisi was speechless. Tears welled up in her eye. She asked him what had even happened. Why didn't he want to work with her? Su Zhang said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Xiao Yu was unhappy. Lilisi understood immediately. It felt like her heart was being torn in two. She tried to explain that she was innocent, that she never had those kinds of intentions. Su Zhang wasn't interested in analyzing any of it. He just tuned her out, finished his meal, and got up to leave. It was like Lilisi was only just now realizing that Su Zhang was completely cold, totally incapable of empathy. The color drained from her face instantly, leaving her looking pale. It was only in that moment that she truly understood. Being close to someone doesn't mean you have a shot with them. Not long after, Su Zhang flew back home to take charge of the Yuxiwo group. Su Zhang managed to rub the entire board of directors the wrong way right out of the gate. For starters, he brought in a new CFO to oversee the group's finances. The board members' relatives tensed up the moment they heard that. They were not okay with handing the books over to an outsider. Su Zhang told them the CFO would only stay for 1 year. Once the IPO was done, he'd be gone. Because after that, they couldn't afford to keep him. They only managed to bring him on by dangling profit sharing in front of him. Once the project wrapped, he'd cash out and walk away. He wouldn't stick around a single day. The old man nodded in agreement. For the rest of the issues raised in the meeting, even though the board objected, Su Zhang just acted like it wasn't his problem. The board had no choice but to go along with it for the sake of the IPO. Meanwhile, on the other side, Xiao was still working on his MBA business school. Xing Liu called Qiu and filled him in on how the meeting went. After he hung up, Xiao Yu couldn't stop picturing Su Zhang in the middle of all those negotiations. Because as far as she was concerned, Su Zhang was someone who had absolutely no business negotiating anything. With those thoughts drifting, Xiao Yu lay down in bed and slowly drifted off to sleep. In the courtyard below the apartment building, there was a street lamp in the center of the square. Su Zhang always stood under that lamp waiting for him. He said it was the most visible spot around, and if he stood anywhere else, he was afraid Xiao Yu wouldn't be able to find him. Xiao Yu was half asleep and barely knew what he was doing when he suddenly found himself hugging Su Zhang. Su Zhang's arms were so warm, like a blanket that had been left out in the sun. Then Xiao Yu opened his eyes and woke up, only to find he really was hugging a sun-warm blanket. Now Su Zhang That's when he realized he'd been dreaming. Still groggy, Xiao Yu made his way downstairs with his eyes barely open. He walked out to the square below the building, and there was Su Zhang standing under the street lamp, waiting for him. When he saw Su Zhang's silhouette, Xiao Yu instinctively thought he had to still be dreaming. He thought, why is Su Zhang showing up again? At Su Zhang, just haunting the place like that? Xiao Yu suddenly got irritated, and he just kicked him. Su Zhang was stunned. Xiao Yu was stunned too. The cold wind hit his face. Xiao Yu shivered, slapping him more with, and he realized this wasn't a dream. There was a dark shoe print on Su Zhang's pants, left by Xiao Yu's kick just now. But Su Zhang didn't seem to care. He just said sorry. He looked confused and asked why he's apologizing. Su Zhang looked a little hurt and said, I don't know. So why did you kick me? Xiao Yu had no answer for that. Xiao Yu had been about to ask Zhong why he'd shown up out of nowhere. But his mind moved fast, and he quickly thought, what if Su Zhong said something like, because I missed you so much, I just had to come see you. The kind of cheesy line that melts your defenses anyway. He stepped back half, made up his mind that no matter what Su Zhong said, he'd shut it down, no except. With his mind made up, Xiao Yu put on a stern face and asked Su Zhang what he was doing, adding that he was heading to the library to study today, and didn't have time for him. So Zhang said the prospectus was ready, and he'd come to see if Xiao Yu had any notes or changes. Xiao Yu's composure cracked. He said awkwardly, fine, let's go upstairs and talk. As he hit it, Xiao Yu muttered, asking Su Zhang why he couldn't just send it online. We'll go over in the call. Why did he have to fly all the way over here? Just then, Su Zhang leaned in close to Xiao Yu and whispered in his ear, because I missed you so much, I had to come see you. Xiao Yu felt like he'd just been shot in the back. His heart was pounding, and he was cursing himself for letting his guard down. The prospectus had been put together by a professional team. There wasn't much wrong with it. Xiao Yu wasn't exactly an expert who needed to be signing off on revisions, but Xiao Yu still had to put in the work. He had to read through almost 500 pages of the prospectus cover to cover, get every single detail down cold. so nothing slipped through the cracks. On top of that, Xiaoyu was planning to join the roadshow, which meant he needed to know the prospectus inside and out. Xiaoyu was juggling schoolwork and reading through the prospectus at the same time. She was only sleeping 3 hours a night. Her brain felt like it was running on fumes, and she was basically a zombie every single day. She was so out of it that when she walked out of the shower completely naked and ran into Suzhou, she barely even reacted. Suzhou had moved into Xiaoyu's place to look after her. He helped her with her school assignments and talked through the prospectus with her. When it was time to eat, he'd make them both a sandwich. Anything more complicated than that, it was beyond Suzhou's cooking. 1 week left before the roadshow, Xiaoyu took time off and joined the full team to hammer out the final details for the IPO. Once the prospectus was approved, they moved on to pricing. After that came the roadshow prep. For Xiaoyu, the whole thing was more of a thrill ride than a roller coaster. After a long discussion, Xiaoyu was a nervous wreck. She was worried she'd choke, so she suggested letting Suzhou lead the presentation. He was highly involved and had a great image. But the CFO shot it down, since it's unheard of for an investor to lead a roadshow. Suzhou could see Xiaoyu was tense. He gave her a pat on the shoulder and said she didn't need to stress. At the end of the day, what really drives investment decisions is the company's fundamental. The presenter doesn't make or break the deal. Xiaoyu hadn't expected Suzhou to say something so genuinely sweet. She'd figured that with his emotional intelligence, not throwing cold water on her was already the best she could hope. She never thought he'd actually try to comfort her. Then the CFO promptly burst her bubble, saying that if she couldn't answer investors' questions or give a bad presentation, it could seriously shake their confidence. Xiaoyu blinked and decided this by the book CFO was getting harder and harder to look at. No wonder the board all thought he was a total buzzkill. But the buzzkill kept going, adding that of course, a charismatic presenter could really elevate the whole pitch and even influence the final valuation. Suzhou heard that and said not to worry. Xiaoyu had plenty of charisma. Xiaoyu's heart skipped. She said a little shyly, "Thanks. You're pretty charming yourself." Suzhou shook his head. "Compared to you, I've got nothing." Xiaoyu was speechless, just staring at Suzhou, a little touched. Suzhou gazed back at her face, his eyes full of warmth. The CFO standing behind them couldn't stand watching their little moment. Then coldly cut them. "Are you two here for an IPO or a hookup? Can you please focus?" And Xiaoyu felt her face go hot. She cleared her throat and immediately steered the conversation back on track. She asked Flo if he thought they could hit the $100 million fundraising target. The CFO said he had no idea. That was outside his scope. 自赏的菜俩刺里will. Xiaoyu still frowned with self-doubt, a worry she'd mess everything up. Suzhou took her hand firmly and looked her in the eye. Life we don't, it won't be on you. If something goes wrong, that's on me. I'll personally cover whatever gap there is up to $100 million. Xiaoyu 全都和蔼地玩 and said stubbornly, "I don't want that. I don't need the money." To be fair, her investment portfolio had been doing well, and she could pull out over $100 million if she had to. Suzhou said, "I know you don't need it. I just want to give it to you." The CFO nearby was practically blinded by the two of them. He thought to himself, if you two have over $100 million to throw around, can you just get a room? The venue was, unsurprisingly, a 5-star hotel. Xiaoyu put on her tailored suit, hair swept back, looking sharp and polished. But inside her heart was pounding like crazy. Right before she went on, Suzhou said to her, "Didn't you used to teach? Just think of it like giving a lecture. You're magnetic when you teach." Xiaoyu could take a compliment from anyone, just not from Suzhou. She brushed her hair over her ear, trying to hide how red the tips had gone, and said hesitantly, "You've never even seen me teach." To her surprise, Suzhou said he had. He'd actually downloaded her recorded lectures and watched them modem. He said it with a gentle expression, his eyes full of a warmth that could melt anyone. By the time he finished talking, Xiaoyu's face had gone completely red. She took a deep breath, kept Suzhou's words in mind as she stood on stage, quickly found her groove. She had her time as a lecturer to thank for it. It had given her the ability to speak, clearly and confidently in front of a crowd. By the first roadshow, they'd already hit $100 million in subscriptions. They were only self-commitments, but that number was enough to send Xiaoyu through the roof. Because $100 million was her entire fundraising goal to begin with. They followed their planned route through major cities, and it was smooth sailing the whole way. The final stop in New York was a smashing success too. All told, they raised $5 billion, 50 times her original target. At the after-party following the roadshow, Xiaoyu was the center of attention. Everyone was eager to chat him up, watching the crowd swirl around him. He thought back 3 years ago, when he and Suzhou attended a cocktail party together. Back then, he was just Suzhou's +1. Everyone only had eyes for Suzhou. When people talked business and investments, he couldn't get a word in. All of that felt like ancient history now. Xiaoyu slipped away from the crowd, heading toward the restroom just to catch his breath, when he ran into a familiar face. Wait, wasn't this the same guy who cornered him in the bathroom back then and humiliated him? The guy was trying to cut the line with Xiaoyu, just like 3 years ago. Xiaoyu channeled Suzhou's old cool, unbothered attitude and said the subscription was full, no cutting in line. Bah, the guy said he could pay more. Xiaoyu hadn't expected him to cave so easily. Suzhou was the type where full meant full. You could offer him $1 billion and he still wouldn't budge. But Xiaoyu, as long as the money was right, anything was on the table. So Xiaoyu threw out a number, the guy agreed without even blinking. Like he would have paid whatever Xiaoyu asked. Surprised as he was, Xiaoyu brought it up later with Su Zhang, joking that he'd expected the guy to haggle. Su Zhang said he wouldn't. Because you're worth it. Without you, Yazhu wouldn't be worth that price. Maybe that was true. If they'd gone with Ximu's plan, and rushed Ye Zhu through a backdoor listing back home, it definitely wouldn't look this good right now. But this wasn't all Xiaoyu's doing. Without Su Zhang, sure wouldn't be worth this much. In that moment, the two of them stood under the brilliant lights, both of them glowing. Looking at each other, there was admiration in their recognition, and maybe something a little stronger than the drinks they'd had. After a while, Su Zhang got restless and bored, so he asked Xiaoyu if he wanted to go to Las Vegas. Xiaoyu was still puzzling over how they'd get there at this hour. When Su Zhang's helicopter was already pulling up, by the time Su Zhang and Xiaoyu landed, it was well past midnight. And late night is exactly when Las Vegas comes alive. They skipped the casino and settled into a lively bar for drinks. Xiaoyu sipped his drink, watching the performers on stage, his eyes going soft. Time seemed to rewind before him, and he couldn't help himself, like an old man, rambling on and on about the past. He thought about how he'd been running himself ragged back home, while Su Zhang was out here living it up. And he couldn't help feeling a little bitter. Su Zhang started to explain himself, insisting he hadn't been living it up at all. But Xiaoyu just waved it off and said he didn't care anymore. Su Zhang watched Xiaoyu's flushed cheeks in the light. He said, I want you to care. Xiaoyu was pretty drunk, lost somewhere at the bottom of his glass, and didn't respond to Su Zhang. He just picked up his drink and downed it. Las Vegas nights have a way of doing that to you. Pulling you under. Everyone acting a little foolish, everyone having a blast. Everything feels justified. Nothing seems ridiculous anymore. He wanted to spin, to run, to dance. But he realized what he really wanted was just a hug. Su Zhang pulled him into a hug, the kind you can't shake loose. Hadn't let himself go like this in a long time. The drunk hit him fast. Everything in front of him dissolved into a stream of consciousness, like the surface of the ocean suddenly churning with waves. The calm completely gone. The stars reflected on the water began to sway and flicker. Both the sun and the moon were out at once, one side gentle, the other burning. The next morning, Xingyu was back home, sitting in the lounge having a drink, when his phone rang. It was Xiaoyu. And slightly hoarse, as he told Xingwu, he'd made a huge mistake. Xingwu asked with some concern what was going on, and what was up with his voice. Xiaoyu just said he'd had too much to drink last night. His voice was... I made a mistake. And asked if he'd slept with Su Zhang. Xiaoyu didn't know how to explain it, because it was actually worse than that. She had come to New York for a roadshow, but Su Zhang dragged her all the way to Las Vegas. Not only did he take full advantage of her, she somehow ended up married. She'd wanted to call her mom and ask what to do. Said she could walk away with half of Su Zhang's fortune, easy money. But Xiaoyu just couldn't wrap her head around it. One night she's single, the next she's married, and by morning she's supposed to be prepping for a divorce case. She spotted the note Su Zhang had left saying he'd be back soon, and immediately got dressed and bolted. Just like that, Xiaoyu checked into a different hotel in Las Vegas. She didn't even know what she was hiding from. She'd always told herself she was done with him for good. And now they were married. Her mind kept replaying everything that had happened with Su Zhang the night before, and her face burned red just thinking about it. An hour later, Xiaoyu had hoped to just decompress, but she couldn't settle down at all. She had made up her mind to stay away from Su Zhang. But when she actually did, she couldn't stop thinking about him. By evening, Xiaoyu pulled herself together and caught a flight back to New York. The moment she got back to her hotel in New York, she spotted a familiar figure. That made her tense up instantly. Su Zhang was standing right outside her hotel, like a big dog waiting for his owner to come home. The second he saw Xiaoyu, his eyes lit up, and he rushed right over to her, wrapping his arms around her excitedly. Noticing people around them staring, Xiaoyu brought Su Zhang up to her room. While pouring water, Xiaoyu gave herself a quick pep talk. She told herself to just act normal. After a few deep breaths, she handed Su Zhang the glass. She'd been hoping to calm her nerves with some water, but Su Zhang held up his cup and called her Ani, loud and clear. Xiaoyu completely lost it, while nearly spilling her tea everywhere. She awkwardly said she'd been drunk last night and had no idea what was going on. Before she could even finish, the light in Su Zhang's eyes slowly faded. Xiaoyu carefully asked Su Zhang whether it was too late to get the marriage annulled. Su Zhang was immediately on guard. He said flatly that it was too late. Xiaoyu looked at him, confused. Why? Su Zhang said the news of their marriage had already been filed and would go public tomorrow. Xiaoyu jumped up like a startled cat. She demanded to know how he could do that. Su Zhang laid out the consequences of keeping it private in a cool, matter-of-fact tone. Xiaoyu was completely stumped. She was backed into a corner, but still pushed herself to bring up divorce. Su Zhang's expression went stone cold, like he completely shut down. He looked down, but after a long, he pulled out his tablet, put on his glasses, and launched into an impromptu presentation on how an executive divorce could tank a company's IPO. He even rattled off a bunch of real divorces where shareholders' divorces caused their company's listings to completely fall apart. Xiaoyu felt like she'd been transported back to a lecture hall, listening to a professor cite case after case, while she sat there nodding along, nearly reaching for a notebook to write down the key points. When he finally wrapped up, Su Zhang pulled Xiaoyu onto his lap, and asked if she still wanted that. Xiao Yu had been completely sold and said she would drop. Su Zhang finally gave a satisfied nod. Looking at Su Zhang this close, smiling that perfectly, Xiao Yu thought it should be illegal to look that good. It took her a while to come back to earth, completely baffled by how easily she'd been talked into it. A few days later, the news of Su Zhang and Xiao Yu's marriage went public. They even held a press conference for it. When reporters wanted a photo of them to give, Su Zhang naturally put his arm around Xiao Yu, though Xiao Yu felt a little uncomfortable. But then she remembered what her mom had told her. The man might not be worth keeping, but she had to keep up appearances for the money. So she just went along with Su Zhang. Sure, the whirlwind marriage was sudden, but Xiao Yu and Su Zhang had already been all over the tabloids together. Most people in their circle weren't all that surprised. Once the announcement went out, the congratulation calls started. What would you do if you were gifted beyond your years, but just couldn't connect with kids your own age? That was Su Zhang. He grew up in a single-parent home. Even as a kid, he could tell he was different from everyone else. He asked his mother about it, but his mother, Lin Changheng, told him that was everyone else's question. He didn't need to worry. No matter how many times Su Zhang turned to Lin Changheng for help, the answer was always the same. You're perfect. You're the best. Nobody understood. Just look out for yourself. Su Zhang was Lin Changheng's pride and joy. Su Zhang had to be perfect. She would never admit he had any flaws. Gradually, Su Zhang got used to shutting himself off, pulling further and further away until he became someone who was barely responsive to the world around him, almost completely detached. Then Xing Quanyu came along. He broke through Su Zhang's walls, and Su Zhang's heart slowly began to open. Of course, Su Zhang is gay. That was something Lin Cheng absolutely refused to accept. She even said that if Su Zhang didn't marry a woman, he was a freak. He couldn't handle it, so he left. After that, aside from sending money home every month, Su Zhang cut off contact with Lin Cheng and Tai. From the news, it hit her like a bomb going off in her head. She suddenly realized that the fortress she had spent years building up completely crumbled. She threw caution to the wind and called Su Zhang right away, saying she was coming to the States. At that moment, Su Zhang was in his walk-in closet picking out an outfit. He picked a crisp white suit. Xiao Yu had once said he looked stunning in that color, like a vision out of a dream. Once Su Zhang was dressed, he grabbed a bouquet of roses and went to find Xiao Yu, letting him know his hand ahead to the air. Xiao Yu opened the door, and Su Zhang handed him the flower. He had made up his mind. This time, he was never letting Xiao Yu go. Watching all of this, Xiao Yu couldn't help but wonder to himself, what can he really could still back in the class? Because Yushu was about to go public, a number of Yushu's top executives flew to the States to meet with Xiao Yu and Su Zhang. After all the airport pickups, Xiao Yu came home and collapsed on the bed. Su Zhang also told Xiao Yu that his mother had come to the States too. I wanted to have dinner with him. The moment Xiao Yu heard Lin Changheng was coming, he had a bad feeling. He asked Su Zhang whether he had told his mom they were just husband and husband. Su Zhang rolled over and pinned Xiao Yu down, saying they were anything but on paper. He was for real. But Xiao Yu pushed back, pointing out they weren't even sleeping in the same bed. Su Zhang's eyes lit up at that, asking Xiao Yu if he was saying he wanted to share a bed. Almost caught off guard by how good-looking Su Zhang was, pulled away fast, saying absolutely not. Su Zhang wasn't giving up that easily, and asked if he wanted to do a proper. The moment that topic came up, Xiao Yu lost his cool. He shook Su Zhang off, saying they already had a license. He latched onto the word proposal from what Xiao Yu said, and quietly started forming a plan. Meanwhile, sure, he couldn't stand her, but she was still an elder, and making a scene would just look bad. So he came up with an idea. Fight fire with fire. Only a mom can take on another mom. Su Zhang kept his work life and personal life separate. When he went to pick up Lin Changheng, he didn't even bring his assistant, but just went by himself. She was not happy. Su Zhang was genuinely confused about why Xiao Yu should have to come, since honestly, if Lin Changheng hadn't asked him to pick her up, he wouldn't have come either. She immediately launched into an emotional guilt trip, going on about how hard her life had been. Suffocating him. When dealing with your boyfriend's mom, you gotta bring out your secret weapon. Su Zhang took Changheng to the restaurant to have dinner with Xiao Yu. The three of them settled into a private dining room. Xiao Yu politely greeted her as ma'am and asked if the flight had worn her out. But Lin Changheng just smiled and said, why are you still calling me mom? You should be calling me mama. Xiao Yu didn't hold back. She said that wasn't really their thing. Lin Changheng's expression went stiff and she was clearly not happy. In her mind, Xiao Yu was still that meek, timid little teacher. Someone who never used to dare talk back. Now suddenly she had a spine. Just then, the door to the private room swung open. A glamorously dressed woman walked in with a bright smile, her laugh like wind chimes. Xiao Yu stood up and introduced her mother. Before Su Zhang's mother could even process what was happening, Xing Yu stepped forward, grabbed her hand, and started chatting her up like they were old friends. Lin Changheng was caught off guard by Xing Mu's warmth. She felt a little rattled inside. Once the food arrived, Su Zhang started peeling shrimp for Xiao Yu, cleaning every piece before setting it in front of her. Watching her son wait on someone like that, Lin Changheng felt a pang of jealousy. She snapped at Su Zhang, how come you're not peeling her shrimp too? Su Zhang didn't catch the bitterness in her voice. Lin Changheng couldn't help herself and made a snide remark, saying Xiao Yu grew up eating fancy food, so she must know how to crack open a lobster. Xiao Yu saw right through her and was about to fire back. but Xingmu beat her to it, and she was way more cutting about it. She said her Xiaoyu was spoiled rotten growing up, never lifted a finger her entire life. I couldn't crack a lobster if her life depended on it. Shoot, someone even tied her shoes for her. Honestly, when Xiaoyu said she wanted to be with Su Zhong, she had her doubts. But seeing him now, he really does know how to take care of her. Hearing that, Su Zhong nodded right away with a look of pure pride and said he was more than happy to. Lin Changhang was fuming. All she wanted to know was what kind of spell Xing Juangyu had cast on Su Zhong to make him act like a complete fool. Lin Changhang still wasn't done. She turned to ask when they were planning the wedding. Xiaoyu played the shy bride to be and stayed quiet. Su Zhong said they hadn't made any wedding plans yet. Lin Changhang had already expected that. So she said they didn't have to do a big wedding, but they at least need to go back at the family dinner and do the tea ceremony, keep up appearances. Some traditions you just can't skip. Xiaoyu immediately zeroed in on the words tea ceremony buried in Lin Changhang's speech. She knew right away this was about way more than just a casual family dinner. Xiaoyu's suspicion was dead on. Lin Changhang absolutely had an agenda. Her plan was to lure Xiaoyu onto her turf, then use tradition and family values as leverage to put Xiaoyu in her place. Xingmu had figured that out too. Xingmu cheerfully right along with Lin Changhang's idea. Lin Changhang was stunned. She hadn't expected Xingmu to agree so quickly and easily. But things were about to get a whole lot more interesting. She said she'd personally foot the bill for a lavish red envelope gift to $88,000 for the kid, and told Lin Changhang to handle the rest however she saw fit. Lin Changhang's face went completely pale. That's when Xiaoyu stepped in and played the gracious humble card. She said families like theirs doing a traditional wedding would easily run over $1 million. Honestly, that money would be better off going to charity. Had just barely recovered from the shock of $88,000, and now hearing it could top $1 million, she completely lost it. Totally blindsided, all her confidence gone in an instant. Back at the hotel, Su Zhong was on the side working, and Xiaoyu nearly got completely distracted watching him. She sat down beside him, her mind drifting back to what Xingmu had pulled her aside to say after dinner. Xingmu said that here in the States, staying in separate hotel rooms was fine. But once they were back home, living apart would definitely raise eyebrows. She asked Xiaoyu what she planned to do when that time came. Xiaoyu blushed at the thought of actually moving in together. If Su Zhong expected her to fulfill her wifely duties, she didn't even know where to look. 3 years later, Xiaoyu returned to the place they used to share. Su Zhong had both hands full of luggage and couldn't reach the door. Seeing the familiar surroundings, Xiaoyu instinctively pressed her finger to the fingerprint lock. The door clicked open right away. That's when Xiaoyu realized her fingerprint still worked on this door. Su Zhong couldn't understand why she was so surprised. Her fingerprint had always worked on that door, hiding it. Xiaoyu stepped inside, and the familiar scent hit her all at once. The living room looked exactly the same as she remembered, except for the blanket tossed over the couch, a half-burned scented candle, and a pair of slippers left carelessly on the floor. None of it fit Su Zhong's usual neat, tidy habits. Xiaoyu pointed at the half-burned candle and asked Su Zhong if he'd been using it. Su Zhong told her casually that it was the one she'd left unfinished last time. He said last time, as if she'd only just left. Xiaoyu's heart was racing, and a flood of buried feelings threatened to break through. Afraid of losing her, she dug her nails into her palm and casually changed the subject, saying that long-haul flights are just exhausting. Su Zhang fought the urge to wrap his arms around her from behind and said, as calmly as he could, "You're finally back." Since Su Zhang and Xiaoyu had agreed to keep up appearances as a couple, they naturally slept in separate rooms. But at this point, Xiaoyu had to admit that Su Zhang cared about her more than she'd given him credit for. She had broken up with him because she thought he was cold and distant. But everything now pointed to the contrary. He was just clueless and oblivious. And now she had no idea how to deal with this oblivious ex, who was dead set on winning her back. Xiaoyu hit the ground running the moment she got back home. Right at the end of the workday, she got a message from Xijiang saying he was coming to pick her up. So she texted back annoyed, asking if she was a child who couldn't find her way home on her own. So Zhang shot back immediately, saying he was the one who couldn't find his way home and needed her. Xiaoyu couldn't take it. She had no idea who had taught this total blockhead to talk like that. When Xiaoyu finally clocked out and headed downstairs, she found the crowd had formed a circle in the plaza below. Parked in the middle was a flashy red sports car that was impossible to miss. Su Zhang stood beside it in a snow-white suit, looking like he owned the place. The whole scene was radiating an over-the-top, extra energy. Yu's instincts fired immediately. That much showing's going to mean one thing. Something big was about to happen. The moment Su Zhang spotted her, he spun around and rushed to the trunk. Just as he was about to open it, Xiaoyu went on high alert. Her mind went into overdrive, and she stopped him right away. She pointed at the trunk and asked if there were 999 red roses in there as tacky as that car. Su Zhang froze. He asked her how she knew. Xiaoyu raised an eyebrow and said it was painfully obvious. Then she looked at him with pleading eyes and said, "Dion, please do not do this." But it was just way too cringe. So Zhang started to panic. He asked if she hated this kind of proposal. Xiaoyu nearly stumbled from the shock. She couldn't believe what she'd just heard. So Zhang told her that he had already hired a band and a whole procession. So mortified she could feel her scalp crawling. Imagine someone pulls up in a flashy red sports car, packed with 999 red roses, right outside your office building or smack in the middle of a plaza, with a whole dance routine declaring they want to marry you today, and then gets down on one knee. What would you do? Most people might swoon, but Xiaoyu was so mortified she nearly dug a hole in the ground to hide in. She had never been more proud of her own quick thinking. She quickly told Su Zhang not to let anyone come out. Su Zhang wasn't about to ignore his wife. He immediately called Thomas and called the whole thing off. Thomas was completely blindsided. Before hanging up, Su Zhang also told him to go file a complaint against that wedding planner. Xiao Yu sat in the red sports car. She asked Su Zhang what made him want to propose. Su Zhang paused, said because she once told him she needed a proper proposal before getting married. Xiao Yu blinked. Looking completely, she told Su Zhang they were already married, so a proposal didn't really matter anymore. But Su Zhang shook his head. His expression thought. He told Xiao Yu that in her heart, well, they weren't really married. To her, this marriage was an accident, a total mix. She never actually agreed to it. As she said it, Su Zhang felt a quiet ache inside, but his voice gave nothing away. Xiao Yu didn't know what to say. Su Zhang pulled over to the side of the road, leaned toward Xiao, and said very seriously that he wanted her consent. Xiao Yu's feelings were all over the place. She didn't answer Su Zhang, because she hadn't even agreed to get back together yet. How could she agree to marriage? Su Zhang didn't push her for an answer right away. He told Xiao Yu the choice was hers, and he'd just keep at it until she said yes. The sincerity in Zhang's eyes was impossible for Xiao Yu to know. She felt herself starting to wave. Ever since they'd run into each other again, Su Zhang had been doing everything he could to Xiao Yu meant to him, yet couldn't quite bring herself to cut things off. Even Xiao Yu herself was starting to feel like she was being a little unfair. After a long silence, Xiao Yu finally spoke. She told Su Zhang not to hire a wedding planner next time. All the roses and the singing were just too over the top. It wasn't her style at all. If it wasn't something he came up with himself, what was the point? Su Zhang quietly took it all in, then repeated back what he understood, in his own precise. Hearing all those technical terms, So Yu suddenly remembered. She still had a paper she hadn't written. For a while after that, she was juggling work and writing her thesis at the same time. She also slowly got used to living with Su Zhang on the same roof. Su Zhang didn't bring up the proposal again. The two of them settled into a fragile but peaceful coexistence. Then one day, a crisis hit the company out of nowhere. Inside Yu Zhiwo Group had been fired back. After that, he went and started his own counterfeit operation under police questioning. He spilled everything about Yu Zhiwo's involvement in the textbooks team too. Just like that, it became public knowledge that Yu Zhiwo Group really had been storing counterfeit textbooks in their warehouse. It was all the stock price took a hit. It was like a bombshell going off. Public outrage. The executives at Yu Zhiwo were stressed out of their minds. When everyone sat down for an emergency meeting, Uncle Xing pointed the finger straight at Xiao Yu. Happened back when she was the one in charge, so she had to take response. Xiao Yu knew this was coming. She just said she'd handle it. The old man nodded, saying he trusted that Xiao Yu would take care of it. After all, she was the CEO. Those words cut deep. It was basically a warning: if you can't fix this, don't bother keeping that CEO title. After the meeting, Xiao Yu and Xing Mu headed back to the office together. Xiao Yu had finally seen it clear. When the company went public, the old man hadn't given her any shit. Now that the stock was down, he immediately used her as a scapegoat. It was obvious he never wanted her to have a secure footing in that seat. Xing Mu seemed to understand too. She shook her head with a resigned sigh, saying men were all the same, and the old ones barked the loudest. Xiao Yu paused, then asked Xing Mu in a serious tone, what was her take? Xing Mu was a little surprised. After a few seconds, she broke into a smile. She said compared to being a princess, she'd much rather be the queen mother. A few days later, the old man got word that the company's stock price had jumped 30%. While the old man was still feeling good about it, his secretary came in. The reason for the rebound was that Su Zhang had bought up 3% more shares. The old man's face went pale the moment he heard that. If Su Zhang had increased this, then he and Xiao Yu together would hold more shares than the old man himself. He immediately asked his secretary if he could still buy more. But the secretary told the stock price had already climbed too high. There wasn't much left to buy even if he tried. The old man let out a cold lie. He thought to himself, no wonder Xiao Yu had gotten so bold these past couple years. Looks like she found herself a very powerful bat. Right when the boss and his wife were about to kiss, I walked in and totally killed the mood. And then I was hit with the boss's death stare. Before I even knew what was happening, his wife said she wanted a divorce, and the boss looked like he wanted to murder me on the spot. So Zhang stared at Xiao Yu with a look of total disbelief. What she just said. Xiao Yu just and told Su Zhang that they pulled that whole stunt just to push us into a divorce. And if we actually went through with it, even finished this all. Because Su Zhang cut her off and said there was no way they were getting divorced. You gently patted Su Zhang on the head to calm him down, then whispered something in his ear. After he left, Su Zhang called Tang Masai back into the office. Su Zhang gave him a look and told him to get in touch with some divorce lawyers. Tang Masai cautiously asked if he was planning to divorce Xing Qian, but Su Zhang said he just wanted to brush up on family law. With a top-tier lawyer, even just a consultation runs hundreds of dollars an hour. Tang Masai couldn't figure out why his boss didn't just take an online course, but he did his job anyway and called a top law firm, saying his boss wanted to learn about family law. On Wall Street, rumors travel faster than wildfire. Even though Tang Masai stressed repeatedly that Su Zhang just wanted to learn about family law, the moment word got out that Su Zhang was consulting divorce lawyers, it turned into the Xing Qian was getting done. Yu Zhiwo Group was in trouble. Everyone knows that kind of rumor can tank a stock price overnight. Yu Zhiwo stock started dropping. In less than a week, Yu Zhiwo stock went from soaring to crashing. Regular investors got the full roller coaster experience, heart pounding the whole way. The old man panicked too and called, ordering Xiao Yu to bring Su Zhang back to clear things up. But Xiao Yu told him over the phone that Su Zhang wasn't even talking to her anymore. If he wanted to reach Su Zhang, calling her directly would be faster. While Xiao Yu was saying all this, Su Zhang was right there next to her, peeling an apple for her. to properly take care of Xinju and Yu. So Zhang had even picked up the art of fancy apple peeler, played moving like light. On the old man's end, he heard Xiao Yu admit straight up that she and Su Zhang were on the outs. He put on a show of concern, but the truth was, the rumor about Xiao Yu hiring an escort the old man had planted himself. The whole point was to drive a wedge between Xiao Yu and Su Zhang. Xiao Yu finally told the old man that if he wanted to find Su Zhou, he might as well just call her in for a meeting. She was a professional and wouldn't be a no-show. Then she hung up. Xiao Yu settled in comfortably against Su Zhong, munching on the little bunny shaped apple he'd carved. Funny thing is, back when they were in their fake marriage, things were so awkward. But now that they were doing this fake divorce thing, Xiao Yu's resistance towards Su had dropped way more than just a little. The more she looked at him, the more she liked what she saw. She'd just reach over and ruffle his hair without even thinking. Su Zhang didn't mind one bit, even when his hair got messed up. It was Xiao Yu who wrinkled her nose a little. When her hand came back all greasy from the hair product, moment Su Zhang heard her say he threw out every single hair product he owned. When people at the office noticed Su Zhang had stopped styling his hair, they assumed he was too stressed about the divorce trauma to care. Though some people seriously debated how Su Zhang managed to look that good with bedhead. With the divorce rumors swirling around Xiao Yu and Su Zhang, usual group stock kept sliding. The old man called an emergency meeting and brought Su Zhang back in too. Of course, Xiao Yu was there as well. The two of them sat across from each other and fallen out of love. The old man looked them dead in the eye and asked, "Seriously going through with the divorce?" Both of them nodded. The old man figured they were just being. He thought of every reason he could think. But Xiao Yu was done playing along. She slapped her resignation letter on the table and stormed out. The old man looked absolutely devastated and heartbroken on the outside, but was secretly thrilled. He thought to himself, kids will always be kids, no match for the old man. Xiao Yu felt pretty good walking out too, because she didn't have to play dumb. When Yuzhou Group's stock hit rock bottom, Yuzhou Group put out a statement firing Xiao Yu, along with a public apology. Using the stock discount, the old man went on a buying spree, snapping up more Yuzhou shares, and locked in absolute control of the company. To save the group's reputation, the old man stared to the spot himself of how he had groomed Xiao Yu from the beginning, how deeply she had let him down. He said he had been ready to retire, but now as an old horse he had no choice but to rebuild company from the ground up and take the reins once more, riding away the public sympathy. The story of Yuzhou Group's elderly patriarch coming out of retirement to save the day spread like wildfire, a real comeback legend. But right now they're on a nice easy vacation out at sea. Su Zhang slowly moved closer to Xiao, running his head along his abs. He kept dropping hints that there was nobody else around. Xiao Yu got a little shy and said he'd only allow one kiss. Su Zhang's hand slowly slipped into Xiao Yu's shorts, and he gave him a light bite on the neck. Gradually Su Zhang's last shred of self-control snapped, just as Xiao Yu was about to be completely swept away. A phone rang. Xiao Yu immediately pushed Su Zhang away. The founder of Feiyi Mobile Games called Xiao Yu, saying he had a classmate who ran a tech company. The guy was technically brilliant, but had zero social skills. He asked Xiao Yu if he'd be interested in investing. When Xiao Yu heard brilliant tech, no social skills, he couldn't help but glance over at Su Zhang, feeling a quiet wave of affection. He said he'd take a look. This classmate, brilliant tech, zero social skills, his name was Xiao Kong. His startup was focused on smart home technology. He took Xiao Yu on a tour of a fully smart Model C and invited them to stay and experience. Xiao Yu asked him for 2 rooms, because in his mind, he and Su Zhang weren't back together, so they needed separate rooms. But Xiao Kong, like some innkeeper straight out of a soap opera, said they only had 1 room available. Xiao Yu was a little taken aback. Xiao Kong scratched his head and explained that the Model Suite had to be fitted with a full top of the line smart home system, and the cost was just too high. They didn't have the budget. Xiao Kong added that they were both grown men anyway, so sharing a room shouldn't be a big deal. Xiao Yu used to think Su Zhang was pretty clueless, but now he realized there was always someone who could outclass the last guy. Seeing that neither of them objected, Xiao Kong quickly ducked out of the room, leaving Xiao Yu and Su Zhang alone in the suoqi, staring at each other awkwardly. Xiao Yu suggested he could take the couch. Su Zhang could tell that Xiao Yu didn't want to share a bedroom with him, so he told Xiao Yu they could share the bed and just keep to their own. When Xiao Yu came out of the bathroom, he'd skipped the bathrobe and put on a long-sleeve cotton pajama set instead, because sleeping in a robe meant the thing would end up all over the place. Su Zhang glanced at Xiao Yu and asked if he didn't always sleep in silk before. Xiao Yu felt a little guilty and just said he was into cotton these days, not wanting to push it further. He told Su Zhang to go shower already. Su Zhang caught the signal in Xiao Yu's little nudge to go shower and got excited right away. Sure enough, Su Zhang was done showering in no time. When he came out, he'd even shaved, a faint hint of aftershave drifting from his jaw. Xiao Yu squinted and knew right away something was up. There was really only one explanation. He was in the mood. Xiao Yu shot him a guarded look and asked what he was up. Su Zhang said, "Weren't you the one who told me to hurry up and shower?" Xiao Yu's face went red instantly. He suddenly remembered that back in the day, when he was in the mood, he'd never just come out and say it. He'd just tell Su Zhang to go shower. No wonder when he told Su Zhang to go shower just now, Su Zhang looked so caught off guard, and even a little thrilled. Su Zhang moved closer to Xiao Yu and asked if he wanted it. Just then, the bedroom lights cut off. The ambient lighting kicked off, and the mattress warmed up, radiating a soft. Su Zhang's throat moved as he swallowed, like a tube of ice dropping into a glass of whiskey. Xiao Yu's body grew warm, and he couldn't bring himself to say no. Xiao Yu had to admit, he just couldn't resist Su Zhang's face. Oh, that body. You might not believe it, but this time Xiao Yu made the first move. When something that good is right in front of you, life has that kind of willpower. All Xiaoyu could say. So Zhang really knew how to play to his strengths. Watching that usually cold, distant man looking with raw hunger. Xiaoyu felt desire surge inside him fast. He said in the most player tone he could muster that yeah, he wanted it, but they weren't getting back together. He asked Su Zhang if that worked for him. So Zhang took Xiaoyu's hand and asked, do I look like I have a problem with that? So Zhang's voice was different now, no longer crisp and clean. It had gone low and husky, even more intoxicating. Xiaoyu's rational mind, giving in completely to pure instinct, letting hormones take the wheel. At 8 in the morning, the curtains opened automatically. Now Xiaoyu woke up. In the harsh light of day, he finally remembered the crazy thing he'd done the night before. How to put it? He was full of regret. Like seriously regretting. But last night was also genuinely amazing. Off the charts amazing. Remembering he still had a meeting with Xiao Kong today, Xiaoyu forced himself to get it together and dragged himself out of bed unsteady. When he caught sight of Su Zhang brushing his teeth, hearing Xiaoyu come in, Su Zhang turned his head and gave him a casual nod. Xiaoyu kept his cool. He figured if Su Zhang was acting this chill, then freaking out would just make him look bad. So he played it cool and strolled into the bathroom. The bathroom was pretty high-tech. The moment Xiaoyu, the toilet lid popped open on the mat and started playing the sound of a babbling brook. Xiaoyu sat on the toilet, zoning out. Just when Xiaoyu was thinking this toilet was the most annoying thing, it beeped again and warned him that sitting on the toilet too long could cause constipation if it became a habit. Xiaoyu snapped and told it to shut up. The toilet said okay, then immediately started playing a song, Shook Up. Xiaoyu was so mad he tried to find the off button. He never found out, but he did accidentally drop his phone in the bowl. Xiaoyu never imagined that in his lifetime he would ever get this furious at the toilet and goes on there. Xiao Kang at conference room. Xiaoyu went all in criticizing the smart toilet experience. So Zhang sat at the table without saying a word. With the same kind of social awkwardness she had, that classic tech nerd energy. She threw him a lifeline and asked what he thought. So Zhang said it was actually pretty good, especially the bed in the bedroom. Xiao Kang burst into tears, because that bed had been designed by her ex-boyfriend. After the meeting wrapped up, Su Zhang asked Xiaoyu if business was done, and whether he wanted to grab a drink. Xiaoyu thought about how his backside was still sore, and turned him down. Xiao Kang jumped up and said she was down. But Su Zhang looked at her, with a face that screamed, not interested. Xiaoyu figured they both kinda wanted to go. He suggested they go together. Then because Xiaoyu casually said, you two go grab a drink, Su Zhang took that literally and ran with it, immediately agreeing to go drinking with Xiao Kang. Xiao Kang and Su Zhang drank for a good while. Both of them were terrible at socializing, so there really wasn't much to say. After a long silence, Su Zhang asked what he thought was the most important part of a proposal. The moment Xiao Kang heard proposal, she immediately puffed up her chest and said that was totally her department. So the two socially challenged disasters started cooking up a proposal plan. Xiaoyu had slept the whole day and barely recovered when a delicious smell pulled him out of it. He walked to the kitchen and found Su Zhang in a suit and apron, grilling steaks. Xiaoyu took in the almost too cool for school scene in front of him and couldn't help but blush a little. But then his eyes wandered to the candles on the dining table and the fancy Western place settings, and a strange feeling suddenly washed over him. Like, was this about to be another proposal? The moment that possibility crossed his mind, he spun around and rushed back to check the mirror. The reflection staring back at him was last night's, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a baggy cotton pajama set, looking anything but. There was no way she could accept a proposal looking like this. But Su Zhang was already calling him to come eat. He let out a sigh and made his way to the table. Su Zhang seemed completely normal. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing weird coming out of his mouth. Xiaoyu finally relaxed a little. Then, the doorbell rang. Xiao Kang's voice came from outside the door. She said she was there to drop something off. Xiaoyu let her in, and the moment he saw the champagne she was holding sank. It was Louis Roederer crystal. Basically the go-to proposal champagne. Xiaoyu took one look and felt like something was there. Was this about to be one of those demon drinks hidden at the bottom of the glass moves? So she said she had a bit of a headache today and told him to just leave it for now. But Su Zhang and Xiao Kang exchanged a look. Xiao Kang nodded and told Xiaoyu she had something on her face. Xiaoyu froze and Su Zhang nodded too. Xiaoyu quickly turned and headed to the bathroom. When she got to the bathroom mirror, the toilet behind her popped open. The opening was no big deal, but what was inside nearly gave her a heart attack. The toilet bowl was stuffed with roses, and it started playing a romantic wedding march. Xiaoyu nearly dropped dead on the spot from shock. When she spun around to walk out, she found Su Zhang holding a velvet box. Down on one knee at the bathroom doorway, Xiao Kang was standing by like a soldier on the front line, clutching the proposal chair, ready to pop it at any second. Xiaoyu finally put it all together. Her face went stiff. Then she asked if the two of them had planned this together. Su Zhang looked at her like a puppy waiting to be praised, and asked if she was surprised. Xiao Kang was beaming with pride too, calling it the romance of technology. Xiaoyu gave them both a very honest assessment, because she said they both needed to see a therapist. Su Zhang's second proposal was of course another complete failure. Does having a son make you a funeral expert or something? Why does it have to be him to see you off when you die? After that night at Xiao Kang Tech, Su Zhang and Xiaoyu came back home and quietly moved back in together. Xiaoyu kept insisting they weren't back together, and Su Zhang agreed they were just sharing a roof. But before they could even settle into that awkward limbo, things took a turn. One day Su Zhang and Xiao Yu opened the door to find the whole crowd outside, all of Lin Chenghang's relatives. They basically pushed Su Zhang and Xing Qiangyu's heads down, making them bow and greet everyone as cousins and their wives. Xiao Yu was no stranger to this kind of scene. He smiled warmly, greeted everyone, and handled all the pleasantries perfectly. Throughout the whole meal, Lin Chenghang's brother kept dropping hints, asking why the two of them hadn't gone back to pay their respects to the elders. Xiao Yu just smiled and said, "Please, uncle, go ahead and bow a couple extra times on our behalf. Consider it our regards." Your translation: if you want to bow so badly, go do it yourself. The moment Xiao Yu said that, everyone knew he wasn't someone to mess with. The Lin family's expression soared immediately. Han quickly smoothed things over, urging everyone to sit down and have some tea. Since it was their first meeting, nobody wanted things to blow up, so they turned around and started laying it on thick with Xiao Yu. After a while, Lin Chenghang's cousin sheepishly mentioned they didn't have much education and were having a hard time finding decent work in the city. They asked if Su Zhang had any openings at his company. Su Zhang thought about it seriously and said they could come sweep the floors. The cousin nearly lost it when he heard that. Right then, the uncle let out a sigh and started going on about how the elderly folks back home had no house insurance. Su Zhang just said, "That's on you kids for not getting them covered." Chen shut the uncle's fist. Xiao Yu could barely keep from laughing and chimed in, "The elders can't be without insurance, that's not right. Leave that to me." As far as Xiao Yu was concerned, nothing was easier to solve than something money could fix. If showing respect meant something, he'd rather just pay for their insurance than go back and bow to anyone. At that, the uncle's eyes immediately softened when he looked at Xiao Yu. The relatives quickly figured out that Su Zhang was a brick wall. There was no squeezing anything out of him. Xing Qianyu, on the other hand, actually understood how to play nice. He was willing to give people face and let a little something slip through. So just like that, everyone warmed up and welcomed Xing Qianyu as one of their own. Near the end of the meal, Su Zhang's aunt suddenly brought up whether they were planning to have kids. Xiao Yu's heart sank. He just kept his head down and said nothing. Su Zhang said completely straight-faced that they were both meant to having kids wasn't really an option. He added that if Xiao Yu ever wanted a child, adoption was always on the table. Xiao Yu thought to himself, since when did he want kids? Before Xiao Yu could even shake his head, Lin Chenghang shot it down first. An adopted kid isn't real family. They're never really on your side. Xiao Yu picked up on something else in Lin Chenghang's words and asked him to say what was really on his mind. Lin Chenghang had a hard week before finally coming out with it. Turns out he wanted to pass Su Zhang's uncle's younger son into Su Zhang's name as his heir. Xiao Yu was Jian Yongzi. He'd heard of that kind of thing before, but never imagined it would happen to him. And he definitely didn't expect Lin Chenghang to have come so prepared. The kid was already there. Su Zhang seemed just as lost as to how any of this had happened. I'm an orphan. What isn't an orphan? Why would we take him in? Hearing that, the uncle's face went pale. But the aunt had jumped in right away, saying they had no sons. What would happen when they died with no one to carry on for them? Su Zhang genuinely couldn't wrap his head around needing a son for that. He said, "Does having a son make you a funeral expert or something?" That killed the mood in the room pretty fast. Lin Chenghang quickly plastered on a smile and said maybe your walk could just hang around them for a while and see how it felt. Everyone turned and stared at Xiao Yu waiting. Xiao Yu thought about it for a moment, then said yes without hesitating. Nobody expected Xing Qianyu to be so easygoing about it. They were all caught off guard in the best way. After that, Lin Chenghang moved in too, almost like he was afraid Xiao Yu might pull something, just to keep an eye on her wa. And just like that, the chapter of Su Zhang and Xiao Yu living in their tense little standoff at home came to an end. He's a genuinely good person. All those lies people are spreading about her online. Su Zhang was not happy about moving in at all. After all, now he couldn't pick fights with Xiao Yu anymore. Xiao Yu, on the other hand, was pretty focused on the kid. She signed him up for 8 different classes all at once, a brutal non-stop schedule. On top of that, Xiao Yu hired a nutritionist to put together a custom meal plan for the kid. So every day, the kid had to eat clean, healthy meals. No snacks, no sugary drinks, period. In less than 3 days, he was throwing full-on tantrums. Lin Chenghang felt awful watching him. Xiao Yu's was thought. She said she was raised exactly the same way growing up. Everything she was doing was for the kid's own good. Lin Chenghang had absolutely nothing to say to that. Her wa finally snapped and started screaming. Lin Chenghang went pale watching it all. She rushed over to hold her back. But this time, there was no stopping him. Wa was biting, screaming, cursing up a storm. Xiao Yu suggested sending Yewa back to his uncle's place. Once Wa was gone, Xiao Yu and Su Zhang happily started planning their life together again, just the two of them. Lin Chenghang just sat on the couch with a long face. Seeing his mother still sitting there, Su Zhang looked confused and asked why she hadn't packed up and left yet. Lin Chenghang felt like she was about to have a stroke. Her own son was seriously asking her to leave. If she hadn't watched Su Zhang grow up from day one, she would have dropped dead from sheer rage right then and there. But she had raised him herself. And she knew that was just how Su Zhang's brain worked. No malice behind it. So she was convinced. So she started using the Horror situation as ammunition. She was deliberately picking a fight with Xiao Yu, trying to call back some sense of relevance. Xiao Yu had no interest in fighting with an elder, so he just played dumb, saying he had no idea what she was talking about. Su Zhang chimed in from the side, saying the same thing. If it had just been Xing Qianyu acting that way. That sent Lin Chenghang over the edge. She threw all pretense out the window and got right in Xiao Yu's face, yelling, "Don't think I don't know exactly what you are. My son is too naive. He can't see through you, so you played him. Everyone knows what you really are. The whole internet knows it. Only my idiot son puts you on a pedestal and worships the ground you walk on. If it weren't for the fact that Lin Changhang was Su Zhang's mother, Xiaoyu would not have been nearly this restrained. Hearing all that, she was done holding back. She was ready to go all in. But just then, Su Zhang spoke up. He stepped up beside Xiaoyu and said to Lin Changhang, "You've gone way too far. Xiaoyu is a good person. All that trash people are saying about her online." Lin Changhang was grinding her back teeth to dust. She said to Su Zhang, "She has no respect for me. Why are you still defending her? You're the one who started trash talking. How did that turn into her disrespecting? You're not acting like yourself right now. Are you going through menopause?" Lin Changhang couldn't decide whether she was angry at Su Zhang or at Xiaoyu. But no matter how furious she was at Su Zhang, she couldn't bring herself to say anything harsh to her. In her heart, she kept telling herself Su Zhang was a good boy. He'd just been corrupted and led astray by that Qing Qingyu. Thinking that way, every time Lin Changhang looked at Qing Yu, she screamed at Xiaoyu, "It's all your fault. You're shameless and rotten to the core. Always throwing your weight around." Since Lin Changhang had already burned the bridge, Xiaoyu wasn't going to keep playing nice. Xiaoyu walked up to Lin Changhang with a cold smirk, leaned in, and said, "If you don't know when to quit," she'd show her exactly what shameless looks like, and exactly what it means to throw your weight around. Her eyes loaded with pure threat. Lin Changhang's bravado instantly deflated by half, and she shrunk back, then turned to Su Zhang with puppy dog eyes. "You're just gonna stand there and watch someone bully your own mother?" He said, "Oh, Xiaoyu is so sweet. There's no way she'd bully anyone. You've got the wrong idea about her." Lin Changhang was seething, but all that rage just drained into helplessness. There was nothing she could do. She had no choice but to furiously pack her suitcase and slink out. Once Lin Changhang was gone, the apartment finally settled back into its usual peace. Did you ever stop to think that trashing me also hurts Su Zhang? After seeing Lin Changhang out, Su Zhang turned to Xiaoyu with an apologetic look. He said he had no idea his mother had such a problem with her. Xiaoyu gave a helpless smile and said Lin Changhang had a problem with her from the very beginning. "You just never noticed." Su Zhang looked surprised and asked why she never told him. Xiaoyu swallowed, looking a little guilty. She said there were plenty of things she never told him before. This was just one more. Su Zhang nodded and said it was true. She had kept a lot from him back then. Xiaoyu was a little thrown off, but she couldn't deny it. Xiaoyu hadn't been very open with Su Zhang in the past. Su Zhang sat down beside her and said it was probably his fault for not doing enough, for not giving her a reason to fully trust him. That's why she chose to stay quiet. Bada bing, Xiaoyu shrugged tight and then her eyes grew slightly wet, like ice in early spring that's still frozen but starting to give. Su Zhang understood better than anyone that being truly open with someone takes a deep level of trust. When he was young, he had once opened up to his mother about his own struggles, and she had shut him down. "How could you possibly have any flaws? You're perfect." Well, Su Zhang had felt anxious and helpless back then. In the end, he chose silence. When Su Zhang matched those buried memories against what Xiaoyu must have felt, he got it. She had been too fragile, too scared. That's why she shut down and said nothing. Xiaoyu looked at Su Zhang and saw it in his eyes too, that same fragility and unease. Maybe Su Zhang, who seemed as cold and hard as ice, had a tender heart underneath it all. Xiaoyu rested her head on Su Zhang's shoulder, hoping to ease his fear and vulnerability. For Su Zhang, Xiaoyu truly had a way of calming the fragile and restless parts of him. Several days passed. A friend in the media called Xiaoyu and said Lin Changhang was planning to go public with allegations against her. The friend gave her a rough rundown of what Lin Changhang had said. Lin Changhang had originally just said Xiaoyu was rude, but the reporter felt that wasn't juicy enough and pushed her to embellish and twist the story, ultimately painting Xiaoyu as a conniving, home-wrecking gold digger. With a story that salacious, how could people online not eat it up? Xiaoyu hung up and immediately dialed Lin Changhang's number. Lin Changhang was pretty surprised to get a call from Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu got straight to the point. She asked Lin Changhang, "Fine, make up stories about her all you want, but what did she have to gain by dragging Su Zhang into it?" Lin Changhang's mind flickered. She remembered the reporter warning her that if Xing Qiyang ever called, she had to watch every word. The call might be recorded. Under no circumstances could she admit to making anything up. She had to insist she was only telling the truth. So Lin Changhang stood her ground and said she was just stating the facts. Xiaoyu was caught off guard by that. She asked Lin Changhang what facts exactly. Was she there at that club herself? Changhang's face flushed red with rage at such a crude remark. Xiaoyu didn't want to keep going back and forth with her. She said, "Fine, spread lies about me all you want, but didn't it occur to you that Su Zhang gets hurt in the process too?" Changhang still. Xiaoyu pressed on and said, "By trashing me, aren't you basically announcing to the world that Su Zhang got cheated on? Have you thought about how Su Zhang would feel, finding out his own mother is the one smearing the person he loves?" "Daddy Mama, if you change your mind, come find me." Those words hit Lin Changhang like a knife straight to the chest. It was brutal. Lin Changhang had no comeback. She hung up without a word. After she hung up, her whole body was shaking with fury. She swore to herself she would never bow down to that awful man. Just as Lin Changhang was plotting how to get the media to expose Xiaoyu, there was a knock at her door. It was none other than her own brothers and sisters. They came in and immediately asked if she had gotten into some kind of fight with Xiaoyu. Lin Changhang's face went pale. Before she could say a word, her relatives all started talking over each other, rattling off how the kids' schooling, grandma's insurance, and the nephew's job all depended on Xing Yu. "She has done so much for all of us, and you're going to stab her in the back. Have you lost your mind?" Wu Chengheng had no answer for any of it. She could barely hold herself together in front of Xiaoyu, but in front of her own family, she couldn't keep up the act. As if something just came back to her, she rushed to tell her relatives. Don't forget, when Erwa was sent to stay at her place, he came back a total mess. She was clearly making fools of all of us. So Zhong's uncle just shook his head and said, even so, we can't afford to burn that bridge.
Are you seriously that dense?
Lin Chengheng was speechless. Lin Cheng had originally tried to use family duty and filial obligation to back Xiaoyu and Su Zhong into a corner. She just never saw it coming that Xiaoyu would turn that exact same move right back on her. That card couldn't hold Xiaoyu, but it had Lin Chengheng completely trapped. The duty of filial piety couldn't tie down Xiaoyu, but it sure had a death grip on Lin Chengheng. In the end, the living just can't win against the dead. Lin Chengheng fixed herself up and went to Xiaoyu's place to apologize in person. When Xiaoyu saw her, Lin Chengheng looked exhausted and hollow, like all the life had been drained out of her. Seeing her like that, Xiaoyu actually felt a pang of sympathy. This woman had truly given everything for Su Zhong. Her husband had left her, and her own family looked down on her. For all those long years, her only emotional anchor was her son. The problem was, she gave her all and expected Su Zhong to give his all right back. When she realized her son wasn't actually cold, he had warmth in him, just that all of it went to Xiaoyu. She completely lost it. Lin Chengheng looked completely empty, apologizing like she was just going through the motion. Xiaoyu told her the person she really owed an apology to was Su Zhong. Lin Chengheng flinched like she'd been poked with a needle and slowly lifted her eyes. Just then, Su Zhong came in from outside. He spotted Lin Chengheng and looked slightly caught off guard. Lin Chengheng felt another piece of her heart crack. She couldn't understand why her own son would look at her with such cold eyes. Lin Chengheng looked at Su Zhong with desperate eyes. She said she came to apologize, and that she never should have pushed so hard against him and show you. Su Zhong glanced at her and said the one she really owed an apology to was Xiaoyu. Hearing Su Zhong say the exact same thing as Xiaoyu, Lin Cheng felt dizzy. She felt like everything that mattered to her was slipping through her fingers like sand. Lin Chengheng's eyes instantly welled up. She grabbed Su Zhong by the arm, her voice trembling. I have nothing. All these years, I've had nothing. Nothing except
you.
You're the only family I have. All these years, everything I had, I put into you. I have no friends, no family. I only have you. Lin Chengheng had said those words more times than anyone could count. Su Zhong was already emotionally distant and slow to connect, and after hearing the same thing for years, it was nearly impossible for him to be moved. He was grateful, sure. He just said thanks. But that response crushed Lin Chengheng. She didn't want a flat thanks. She wanted the same burning intensity she felt, reflected right back at her. Lin Chengheng's anger flared up instantly. Her fingers trembled, and harsh words were right on the tip of her tongue. Xiaoyu moved first. She stepped between them and pulled Lin Chengheng aside. She said there was something she'd been meaning to bring up last time. Lin Chengheng's built-up emotions were suddenly cut off. She looked confused. Xiaoyu looked at her and said, broccoli. Last time at dinner, why did you put Chinese broccoli in Su Zhong's bowl? Didn't you know he hates Chinese broccoli? Lin Chengheng's face went stiff, then shifted to pure disbelief. She said Su Zhong used to love it when he was little. Xiaoyu turned to Su Zhong and asked if that was true. Su Zhong shook his head. Lin Chengheng's expression completely froze. Shungtu was little. He told Lin Chengheng he didn't like Chinese broccoli. She brushed it off, forced the vegetables into his bowl anyway, and told him it was good for him. No being picky. After a while, Su Zhong just stopped fighting it. Whatever she put in his bowl, he ate. It was like that with a lot of things. The clothes he wore, the stuff he used. His own preferences didn't matter. It only counted if Lin Chengheng picked it and approved. Xiaoyu looked Lin Chengheng dead in the eye and said, you really are an incredible single mom. But there's no denying you went way too far. With no one to lean on, you turned Su Zhong into an extension of yourself. Whatever you decided was good, he had to accept. Whatever you thought he should do, he had to do. That's not love. Or at least, it's not pure love. The words came out calm and even, but they hit Lin Chengheng harder than any screaming or cursing ever could. Lin Chengheng nearly exploded. She snapped at Xiaoyu. What do you know? You could never love him the way I do. Xiaoyu fired back without missing a beat. You're right, I can't. Why would I love him like his mother? Lin Chengheng was completely shut down. She couldn't say a single word. Once Xiaoyu saw the old man's true colors, he walked away from that whole scramble for affection. He stopped trying to be the perfect grandson the old man wanted. But to keep his grip on things, the old man decided to cut Xiaoyu off financially. He figured money was the easiest way to make someone fall in line. Without cash, Xiaoyu couldn't afford to be so defiant. But to pull that off, the old man had one problem to solve first. The relationship between Xiaoyu and Su Zhong. As long as they were still married, Xiaoyu would keep living like a millionaire. So after thinking it over, the old man had his secretary set up a meeting with Su Zhong. When they met, the old man offered to help Su Zhong get a bigger cut of the assets in the divorce, and in exchange, he wanted Su Zhong's shares. The old man thought he had it all figured out. What he didn't expect was that Su Zhong walked straight out of that meeting and told his wife everything. Hearing this, Xiaoyu felt a chill. He suspected the old man was trying to use his mother as leverage against him. Xingmu was flashy and careless. For years she'd been coasting on the Xing family, and without building anything of her own. It wouldn't be hard for the old man to get to her. Xiaoyu figured he needed to find out what the old man was planning first. He glanced over at Su Zhang. He said the old man came to him because he knows you're worth more than me. So you telling me half your fortune isn't a favor, it's taking advantage of you. Su Zhang panicked immediately and started drawing up plans to put his entire fortune in a fund and hand it all over to Xiaoyu. Seeing Su Zhang actually mapping out how to split his assets, Xiaoyu waved him off and said he didn't want his money. Su Zhang reached over and grabbed his hand. He asked Xiaoyu what he did want. Whatever it was, he'd make it happen. The look on Su Zhang's face was dead serious. Like if Xiaoyu asked for the moon, he'd find a way to bring it down. Xiaoyu shook his head and said if Su Zhang really wanted to help, he should pretend to play ball with the old man and feel out what he's really up to. When Su Zhang heard that, he looked uncomfortable. Su Zhang wasn't much of an actor. Xiaoyu rubbed his and came up with a plan for him. He told Su Zhang to talk as little as possible. When he didn't know what to say, just give a cold smirk and stay silent. Since it was Xiaoyu asking, Su Zhang couldn't say no, even if he was terrible at that. So he gritted his teeth and went for it. So a few days later, Su Zhang called the old man and asked to meet. He got right to the point. He said the shares were on the table. The old man was generous about it. He said he'd buy back the shares at above market price. Once business was done, Su Zhang casually asked what the old man had planned for Xiaoyu. But the old man gave nothing away. Soon after, the old man made his move on Xingmu. Her winery got shut down by inspectors. Apparently some of the imported wines weren't labeled in Chinese, which violated regulations. So she was hit with a 1 million yuan fine and forced to close for correction. Xingmu made a show of being scared, but honestly, that winery was barely making any money to begin with. Now that it was in trouble, she just sold it off. Then blew through the fund Xiaoyu had set up for her dog care, living it up without a care in the world. But Xiaoyu could tell that Xingmu was actually really hurt. Not because her business took a hit, but because the old man had been so ruthless to her. Xiaoyu didn't know what to say, so he just awkwardly offered to book her whichever male model from the club she liked. Xingmu didn't hesitate and headed straight over to check them out. When Xiaoyu got home, Su Zhang could see he was down, so he tried to cheer him up. He couldn't exactly set up a fund for Xiaoyu to go hang out with club models, so he had to step up himself. To keep a low profile, they went to a private movie theater. The screening room was a private with a king-size bed inside, rose petals scattered across it, and dim lighting. Xiaoyu thought he'd accidentally walk into a love hotel. Su Zhang didn't see anything weird about it, and just pulled Xiaoyu down onto the bed to watch the movie. Xiaoyu felt a little awkward. He asked Su Zhang. He wasn't about to propose again, was he? Su Zhang froze for a second. Xiaoyu said every time he saw roses now, all he could think about was that toilet. Su Zhang, please never propose with roses. Su Zhang gave a stiff nod. But watching the movie, Su Zhang still felt a little stung. He asked Xiaoyu if the way he proposed last time had really bothered him that much. Xiaoyu looked a little embarrassed and just said it was a bit unexpected. Private theaters like this usually played older films, and the equipment wasn't as good as a regular cinema. Halfway through the movie, Xiaoyu had already fallen asleep on the bed. Xiaoyu was feeling down, so Su Chang wanted to cheer her up. He took her to a private movie theater. Not long after the movie started, Xiaoyu fell asleep. Seeing she was asleep, Su Chang gently draped a blanket over her. Then he quietly pulled out a bouquet of roses from under the sheet, the ones he planned to propose with, and silently tossed them away. Then Su Chang sat down beside Xiaoyu and gently took her hand. He carefully reached into his pocket and pulled out a wedding ring, and slowly slipped it onto her finger. Xiaoyu had never done a hard day's work in her life. Her fingers were naturally long and slender. With the diamond-studded wedding band on, they looked absolutely stunning. Su Chang murmured softly and solemnly, I make this vow here now. I will love only you forever. I will never leave you, till death do us part. Su Chang knew he wasn't a romantic person. He'd even made peace with the worst-case scenario. He'd never be able to pull off the kind of grand proposal Xiaoyu deserved. So in that dim theater, he made a one-sided vow all on his own. As long as he swore never to leave her, that was enough. Xiaoyu didn't have to say yes, didn't have to wish, didn't even have to hear it. Then Su Chang leaned in and kissed Xiaoyu. And right at that moment, the old film came to its perfect end. When the movie was over, Su Chang quietly slipped the ring back off Xiaoyu's finger, as if none of it had ever happened. But not long after, news of Xiaoyu and Su Chang visiting that private theater together hit the trending charts. The headlines were pretty wild. Junie and Su Chang spotted alone together in a couple's suite for 2 hours. The old man saw the news and was shocked. That's when he realized he'd been played. Su Chang had never intended to help him about. But the old man wasn't about to let it go. Once he realized he'd been outsmarted, he decided to turn the tables and play like. He'd lean into the story that Xiaoyu had been cheating on Su Chang and make it stick. Then he had his secretary pin the whole thing on Xiaoyu's uncle. Xiaoyu saw the trending topics too. It had people wondering, were they actually getting back together? On top of those rumors, fans were even more shocked. They couldn't believe Su Chang had put up with being cheated on. Some of Su Chang's fans were genuinely heartbroken for it. The truth was, even though Xiaoyu's PR team tried everything to clear her name and went after the people spreading lies, the story about Qing Qunyu being framed was already spreading like wildfire. As for the scandal about her son, what really got under her skin was how the internet was going after Su Chang. Su Chang, on the other hand, was completely unfazed. Couldn't help but ask how he managed to not let it bother him. Turns out Su Chang had just deleted his social media app. Xiaoyu kept scrolling through the trending topics. Meanwhile, Sochang behind her was turning up the charm, trying to get her attention. But Xiaoyu was completely absorbed in totally unmoved. Finally, Sochang just tackled her onto the couch. A few days later, Xiaoyu found out someone had been pulling strings behind the scenes to stir up the whole thing. So Xiaoyu put up a serious bounty, and she tracked down the smear campaign operator who'd started the rumors. The operator's boss knew better than to mess with Xia. He broke down crying and begged for some. Xiaoyu put on her best tough boss act. The demand with the talk, and she let him off the hook. While the operator's eyes lit up immediately. He said it was Xiaoyu's uncle who pushed Xiaoyu pulled out her phone and hit record. Told him to go ahead and spell it all out. The operator spilled everything. Said Xiaoyu's uncle had reached out to him directly. Hired him to stake out the club, spy on people and take photos. Then cook up stories and manipulate the hashtag trending topic. 网里可是高叹 hashtag trending topic 2. Once the operator confessed that Xiaoyu turned right around and posted the confession online. She had her team amplify it. Shai goes in full panic mode. He ran to the old man for help. Right when the scandal was at its peak, the old man summoned Xiaoyu back to the families. Xiaoyu got straight to the point. She said her uncle had to publicly apologize and pay 50 million dollars. Do that, and she'd let it go. Otherwise, she'd take it to court. The gloves were already off anyway. Xiaoyu wasn't holding back anymore. Of course, they couldn't reach a deal. Watching Xiaoyu walk away, her uncle was a nervous wreck. He turned to the old man with a desperate look. The old man pounded his cane hard on the Fine, let her shoot. You think we can't afford a lawyer? Her uncle quickly agreed, but deep down he was still scared. After all, this was his first time being taken to court. If Xiaoyu actually won the case against him, would the old man really have his back? Just thinking about it made him break out in a cold sweat. Su Zhang really has the worst timing when it comes to romance. He goes all out at the wrong moments. After leaving the old house, Su Zhang drove Xiaoyu to an amusement park. From a distance, Xiaoyu could already tell Su Zhang had rented the whole place out. Once they got inside, Xiaoyu suddenly thought and hesitantly asked if Su Zhang was planning to propose yet. Su Zhang looked at Xiaoyu and asked why he would propose at an amusement park. Hearing that, Xiaoyu breathed a sigh of relief. Before Xiaoyu could even Su Zhang asked if Xiaoyu really hated the idea of a proposal. Xiaoyu didn't quite know how to answer, and just sighed and said, not really. Su Zhang explained to him that couples are supposed to go to the movies at the amusement park. They'd already done the movies not long ago. So now it was time for the amusement park. Xiaoyu was a little speechless. He half suspected Su Zhang literally had a checklist with a whole list of couple date spots on it. Since they had the whole park to themselves, a dedicated guide was assigned to escort them around and take them from one ride to the next. Honestly, it kind of killed the vibe for a date, because having a third wheel right there made it nearly impossible to find the moment to get close to your boyfriend. So Zhang didn't really see the problem. Anyway, the two of them started working their way through the rides. After more than an hour, the guide announced that the last stop was the romantic carousel, and then their visit would be complete. Su Zhang seemed a little unsatisfied. He asked the guide if that was really all. Then he asked about the cotton candy. The guide paused for a moment. The cotton candy stand wasn't open. Su Zhang's face filled with obvious disappointment. In that moment, Su Zhang looked just like a big dog with droopy ears. The guy quickly offered to call someone in to turn the machine on. Xiaoyu had an idea, and asked the guy to take him to the cotton candy machine so he could run it himself. Su Zhang's eyes lit up instantly. Xiaoyu poured the sugar into the machine, twirled the stick through the spinning threads, and with a few smooth turns somehow spun out a perfectly fluffy cloud of cotton candy. He handed the soft, puffy tray over to Su Zhang. Even the guy couldn't help but compliment Xiaoyu on how skilled he was. Was that back when he was pursuing Su Zhang, he'd heard Su Zhang mention he loved it. So Xiaoyu had gone and bought a cotton candy machine and taught himself how to make it. But after they got together, he'd never once seen Su Zhang eat candy, and he'd gradually forgotten all about it. Xiaoyu asked Su Zhang why he liked cotton candy so much. Su Zhang said that when he was little, he saw cotton candy and thought it looked so. He wanted to try it, but his mom wouldn't let him. So he'd always been curious what it tasted like. Xiaoyu watched Su Zhang lower his head and take a bite, then asked him if he still liked it. Su Zhang smiled, genuinely happy, and said it was because Xiaoyu made it. So yeah, he loved. After that, they went to ride the carousel. When the carousel came to a stop, the guide smiled and asked how they enjoyed it. Su Zhang shook his head and said nada. The guide's smile froze, and then asked if there was something they could improve on. Su Zhang said it had nothing to do with them. The carousel itself just wasn't fun. After the two of them left the amusement park, Xiaoyu asked Su Zhang again why he didn't like the carousel. Su Zhang said that the whole time they were on it, Xiaoyu was always ahead of him, and he was always behind, going around and around, like he could never catch up. Was quiet for a long moment before saying, but when the music stopped, we still got off together and went home. And then, Xiaoyu took Su Zhang's hand and walked out of the park. Su Zhang took another bite of the cotton candy and chewed it slowly. It was sweet. Things between Xiaoyu and Su Zhang. But over at the Xin family patriarch end, it was nothing but bitterness. Because of Xiaoyu's counter, the whole country was now buzzy about the Xin family's rich family inheritance drama. The old man was genuinely furious this time. He figured Xiaoyu was only able to act so bold because of Su Zhang, so he was still set on breaking up Xiaoyu and Su Zhang's marriage. So he came up with a dirty scheme, hired someone to seduce Su Zhang. A few days later, his secretary reported back and said Su Zhang was a total brick wall. Sending someone to seduce him was basically a dead end, seeing that going after Su Zhang wasn't going to work. A few days later, Xiaoyu got a phone call. It was the class president from back in the day inviting him to a class reunion. Of course, Xiaoyu had no interest in going. The class president on the other end mentioned, and then the most popular guy in school would also be there. Since Xiaoyu hadn't planned on going in the first place, no matter what the class president said, Xiaoyu wasn't budging. If your wife got a huge bouquet of roses, and you didn't send them, what would you do? After Xiaoyu turned down the class reunion, just a few days later, she ran into An Yusheng at the mall. An Yusheng had grown into a young man with sharp, mature features, way more handsome than before. Life had given him a polished, confident edge that made him even more magnetic than he used to be. Seeing him like this, Xiaoyu was honestly a little caught off guard. And Yusheng had a way with words, smoother and more charming than she remembered. Xiaoyu felt totally at ease talking with him. Pretty quickly, they found out they had something in common. And Yusheng and Xiaoyu were playing the same game. They played around together, and Xiaoyu had a great time. Her opinion of An Yusheng went way up. An Yusheng knew when to push and when to pull back. He didn't try too hard. After the round, he was ready to head out. Xiaoyu was still pumped and pulled him back, asking for one more game. An Yusheng glanced at his watch and politely said no. He added Xiaoyu on WeChat and said they'd play again when they had time. Xiaoyu agreed. Then An Yusheng asked Xiaoyu if they should loop in Suzhong sometime. Xiaoyu didn't think much of it and just said Suzhong wasn't into game. An Yusheng seemed a little surprised. He told Xiaoyu that if his partner was into something, he'd get into it too. Sharing hobbies is huge when you're in a relationship. For some reason, Xiaoyu caught a whiff of something shady in that comment. But looking at An Yusheng's calm, handsome face, she started wondering if she was reading too much into it. Maybe she was just being paranoid. After that, Xiaoyu and An Yusheng became gaming buddies. They'd play games together, grab coffee once in a while, nothing more than a casual friendship. Then one day, things took a turn. An Yusheng sent a bunch of pink roses to Xiaoyu's place. Xiaoyu was stunned when they arrived. Her first thought was Suzhong proposing again? So she snapped a photo of the roses and sent it to Suzhong, asking if he bought them. Suzhong said no, and Xiaoyu was totally confused. Just then, An Yusheng called, sounding apologetic, and asked if a bunch of pink roses had shown up at her place. Xiaoyu said yes, a little puzzled. An Yusheng explained that he'd meant to ship some game merch to Xiaoyu but mixed up the addresses. The merch went to his sister, and his sister's birthday gift ended up at Xiaoyu's. Xiaoyu was speechless. An Yusheng added that since it already happened, she might as well keep the roses. He hoped they'd brighten her day. When Suzhong got home, he spotted that bunch of pink roses sitting in a white vase. Suzhong's brow furrowed. A few days later, seeing no reaction from Xiaoyu, An Yusheng suggested grabbing dinner and mentioned they should invite Suzhong too. So, they met up for the first time. An Yusheng acted like he and Xiaoyu were old friends, dominating the dinner table with game talk. Suzhong, left out of the conversation, felt a vague discomfort he couldn't quite put his finger on. Luckily, Xiaoyu didn't leave Suzhong out for long. After a bit of game talk, she steered the conversation back to topics he could join in on. An Yusheng casually asked Xiaoyu how the roses were holding up. Xiaoyu said they were. Suzhong cut in, threw them out. An Yusheng didn't miss a beat and smiled, asking if Suzhong-san sent Xiaoyu roses all the time. Suzhong shook his head and said Xiaoyu wasn't a fan of roses. An Yusheng seemed surprised and said he'd keep that in mind. No more roses for Xiaoyu. There was a playful lilt in his voice. Suzhong frowned and told An Yusheng straight up, you shouldn't have sent them in the first place. An Yusheng put his hands up and said that wasn't what he meant. Then he slid a small gift across to Xiaoyu, an apology for the lost game merch. Xiaoyu opened it and was caught off guard. She hadn't expected An Yusheng to know her brand. An Yusheng said he'd called to send the last time they played games together. Suzhong was surprised too and said An Yusheng had one hell of a nose. With a sniffer like that, he could work drug detection. An Yusheng just grinned like he didn't have a care in the world, saying he'd done a little homework on these things. If Suzhong ever needed gift ideas for Xiaoyu, he was welcome to ask. Honestly, saying something like that would usually rub anyone the wrong way. But somehow Suzhong took it completely in stride, and actually offered to add An Yusheng as a contact. Suzhong has zero ability to spot a backstabber. When faced with someone openly flirting with his wife, he basically hands him the keys to the kingdom. After Suzhong and An Yusheng exchanged contact, the meal was pretty much wrapping up. Suzhong glanced at his watch and said he had to head back to the office. Xiaoyu said no problem. She'd find her own way home. An Yusheng immediately jumped in and offered to drive Xiaoyu home. Xiaoyu looked at the perfume sample in her hand, then looked at An Yusheng. She turned to Suzhong and said, alright, An Yusheng will take me home then. Suzhong nodded. Xiaoyu gritted her teeth and asked if Suzhong had anything to say about that. Suzhong thought for a second and said to An Yusheng, thanks. Xiaoyu muttered under her breath, asking if he was even worried. Suzhong looked at An Yusheng and said, please drive safely. An Yusheng smilingly walked Xiaoyu to the car, then said with a sly smirk, your husband's really not gonna walk you out. If she hadn't been suspicious before. After that dinner, Xiaoyu was pretty much onto An Yusheng. Hearing An Yusheng say that only made her more certain. This sleazy piece of work was trying to hit on her, and didn't even care that she was married. Absolutely disgusting. as if someone like him could ever be in her league. The whole ride, Xiao Yu kept An Yusheng at arm's length. Once they reached her place, she pulled the perfume sample out of her bag and said she couldn't. And Yusheng realized his whole plan was about to fall apart and started to panic, saying it was a limited freebie anything. Xiao Yu blinked her big wide eyes, and that's exactly why. I don't want it. She added, do I look like someone who picks up free junk? And Yusheng had no idea what to say to that. Xiao Yu got out of the car and headed back to her apartment, pulled out the game, and was about to delete An Yusheng. Then something suddenly occurred to her. She clicked on An Yusheng's profile, and noticed the account was only 2 months old. He'd been grinding like crazy, and once he hit the same rank as Xiao Yu, he slowed way down. Xiao Yu frowned and thought to herself, if he just wanted to hit on me, would he really go this far? Just then, Xiao Yu thought back to running into An Yusheng. That call she'd gotten from her old squad lead, something clicked in her head. Originally, Xiao Yu was just going to block and delete An Yusheng. But now she decided to play along, go with the flow, and find out if the old man was pulling strings behind the scene. An Yusheng had been sent on a mission after all. Scared of screwing it up, he quickly shot Xiao Yu a message to apologize, saying he wasn't sure what he'd done wrong, but that he really valued her as a friend. Xiao Yu decided to play along. In the games that followed, Xiao Yu seemed like a completely different person. She went on a total tier trash, talking to An Yusheng, something fierce. An Yusheng had to just suck it up and keep playing nice. That evening, Xu Zhong came back to the apartment with this weirdly cheerful look on his face. How come when a backstabber came after him? But now that one was coming after her, Su Zhong couldn't care less. That was so not fair. With that in mind, Xiao Yu grabbed her own perfume from the cabinet, pretended it was a gift from An Yusheng, and sauntered up to Su Zhong, saying she'd been wearing the perfume An Yusheng gave her today. Su Zhong leaned in and said it was a little strong. Xiao Yu figured the backstabber failed to get a rise out of Xi, and had only managed to annoy herself so not working. Xiao Yu picked up her phone, called An Yusheng right in front of Su Zhong, and put it on speaker. An Yusheng's voice came through, asking, what can I do for you? Right in front of Su Zhong, Xiao Yu said into the phone, don't be so formal. Just call me by my name. An Yusheng didn't hold back. He asked if he could call her Xiao Yu, just like her husband did. Xiao Yu laughed and said, it's just a name. Xiao Yu watched Su Zhong, but his expression didn't budge. Then An Yusheng said, by the way, your husband just texted me. Su Zhong immediately tensed up. Xiao Yu was, and asked what Su Zhong had said. An Yusheng said, Su Zhong asked what brands Xiao Yu likes of handbag perfume. An Yusheng started stirring the pot again, saying, you two have been together this long, and he doesn't know any of that. Su Zhong's expression finally shifted. Xiao Yu seemed to notice, and felt a sneaky little thrill inside. But what she didn't expect was just how good this guy was at playing games. And Yusheng figured he actually had a shot. And that's Xiao Yu, is your husband home right now? Su Zhong suddenly spoke up, looking for me. That silence came from An Yusheng's end of the line. Xiao Yu did not see that coming from Su Zhong, and nearly lost it last, but barely held it together and said, Mr. Su, were you eavesdropping on my call? An Yusheng, a total two-faced charm, came face to face with a hug, and he recovered fast. He told Su Zhong that he noticed he wasn't home and he was worried Xiao Yu would get bored. So he came by to keep her company. Su Zhong felt more and more unsettled, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He just asked why An Yusheng was chatting about his wife, and whether he had nothing better to do. And Yusheng laid it on even thicker. He said he wasn't as busy as Su Zhong, so whenever Xiao Yu was free, he could take her shopping, or they could game together, whatever. Plus they'd known each other forever, had tons in common, and it was never boring when they were together. Su Zhong didn't even know how he felt. Logically speaking, there was nothing wrong with what An Yusheng said, but emotionally, Su Zhong felt something rare, something close to rage. Like an animal whose territory had just been invaded. A hostility rising straight from instinct. Xiao Yu could see things were getting awkward. So she said a couple of quick words, and hung up. She turned around, and asked Su Zhong what he thought of An Yusheng. Su Zhong was a little confused. He said An Yusheng hadn't said anything technically rude, but he still felt disrespected. Su Zhong was surprisingly honest about that. He wasn't like how Xiao Yu used to be, hiding his dislike for fake two-faced people, or pretending to be cool about it. Xiao Yu looked at Su Zhong genuinely puzzled expression, and explained, it's because he's such a two-faced snake. Su Zhong was even more confused about what that meant. Xiao Yu didn't bother explaining further. She just said, aren't you good at doing research? Why don't you figure it out yourself? And with that, Xiao Yu slipped off her top, giving him a look that was just a little bit of a tease. The next day, Su Zhong started his research. When Tan Ma Xi came by to drop off some files, Su Zhong asked him about the whole two-faced guy thing. Tan Ma Xi was a straight arrow check, I had no clue, which left Su Zhong pretty disappointed. Tan Ma Xi noticed the boss seemed down, and assumed the boss wasn't satisfied with his answer. So Tan Ma Xi started doing his own research on it, determined to keep up with the boss. At lunch, Tan Ma Xi said he'd figured out what a two-faced guy was, but Su Zhong said that he was already working on how to beat one. Tan Ma Xi was stunned. He said, why not just beat the guy up? What's that your research? Su Zhong quoted some online advice, saying that kind of move makes you look bad. It makes your partner think you have a terrible temper, and they might end up feeling sorry for the snake instead. Tan Masi's browed so hard he could have cracked the walnut on it. He said a partner like that isn't worth keeping. But that made Su Zhang angry. Just then, Su Zhang's phone buzzed with a message from An Yushen. An Yushen had sent a photo of a designer outfit with a note saying he thought Xiaoyu would love it. If yesterday Su Zhang was in humble, student mode, today he was absolutely losing it. But even so, faced with An Yushen's suggestion, Su Zhang still took it seriously. Su Zhang forwarded the outfit photo An Yushen sent to Xiaoyu and asked if she liked that. He also mentioned that An Yushen thought Xiaoyu replied, well, that guy does have decent taste. Su Zhang and Tan Maxi finished lunch together. After they ate, Su Zhang told Tan Maxi to come to the mall with him. Tan Maxi thought it was weird. Why were they going to the mall? Su Zhang said he wanted to see the clothes Xiaoyu liked. Su Zhang and Tan Maxi walked into a store and ran right into An Yushen. They were all there for the same outfit. An Yushen held up his phone towards Su Zhang. He said the store clerk told him they were out of the stock. The clerk looked apologetic. This piece was super popular. Only 2 in the whole city. Both were already. Su Zhang shot Tan Maxi a look, and Tan Maxi got it immediately. He said he'd take care of it right away. So Tan Maxi stepped away and started making calls. Though nobody knew who he was calling. Su Zhang took a seat in the store, and An Yushen sat down across from him. An Yushen smiled and asked Su if that friend of his had connections in the fashion world. Su Zhang said he wasn't sure, just that he was his assistant, who handled things for him. An Yushen nodded. But inside he thought Su Zhang was just the coolest rich guy. After all, limited editions aren't something money alone can get you. You weren't keeping your distance from someone else's wife. That's totally out of line. If Su Zhang hadn't figured things out yesterday, by today he'd definitely read An Yushen's playbook after studying all those two-faced moves. An Yushen didn't expect Su Zhang to come at him so direct. But that kind of two-faced snake isn't scared of someone who goes straight for the throat. An Yushen had already seen this coming. As a schemer looking to steal someone's part, he had a ready-made answer for exactly this situation. He said since they're both guys, he didn't think anything of it. Su Zhang asked him what that had to do with anything. And Yushen pulled out just a straight dude. He said he was hard. It's kind of like what Lily C pulled back in the day. I know he's gay, so nothing's going on between us. Faced with An Yushen's explanation, Su Zhang stayed ice cold and just said it had nothing to do with it. And Yushen let out a dry, awkward laugh and kept going, saying they'd known each other for so long. If anything was going to happen, it would have happened already. He even told Su Zhang not to worry about the classic snake move. What he really meant was, I've known him way longer than you have. If anything was going to happen, you'd never even give him a cold dismissive look and said he wasn't worried. And Yushen just ran. Strategy had completely flopped. Just then, Thomas came back from his phone call. He said everything was taken care of. The boutique manager came over in person and said they could transfer the item from another store. So Zhang asked if the piece could arrive today. He said money wasn't an issue. If money's no issue, then there's no issue at all. The manager nodded right away, and Yushen watched Su Zhang throw his money around like it was nothing, and felt a sting of envy. On his way out, Su Zhang shot at Yushen one last look, like he was looking at a piece of trash. He suddenly asked An Yushen, you wanted to buy this and give it to Xiaoyu, didn't you? And Yushen nodded. Su Zhang, Prasta! Have you ever thought about why you couldn't buy it for him? And Yushen was speechless. Su Zhang's eyes went cold and sharp, locked right on An Yushen, and went in for the kill. He said, because you're not worth that. Su Zhang turned and walked away. That evening, Su Zhang brought home the outfit he'd bought for Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu barely glanced at what Su Zhang had picked out, and zeroed in on the limited edition jacket An Yushen had recommended. He said it looked great in the photo and even better in person. Su Zhang got a little jealous right then and there. He asked Xiaoyu if the outfit he picked wasn't good enough. Xiaoyu couldn't honestly say it was. So he just said, but you're the one who bought this one too, right? A quiet sadness flickering in his eyes. That made Xiaoyu's heart soften immediately. He rushed to reassure him, saying it was no big deal. His own stylist knew fashion better than he did anyway. Nothing to stress over. Besides, things like shopping and gaming, you can always find a better personal shopper or a gaming coach, but no one can replace what we have together. Su Zhang looked at Xiaoyu with tired, worn-out eyes. He said, you won't even get back together with me. So what does what we have even mean? Xiaoyu's face stiffened. Su Zhang saw his expression and quickly apologized. He said he wasn't trying to pressure Xiaoyu. He was just terrified of losing him. Xiaoyu hated seeing Su Zhang look so hurt. He was about to reach out and comfort him, but suddenly stopped. A look of suspicion crossed Xiaoyu's face. He asked Su Zhang if he'd learned that line from some manipulated playbook online. Su Zhang paused for a moment, then honestly nodded. Xiaoyu got a bit of a headache at that. He asked Su Zhang if he now knew that Ansu and Elise were also playing those games. Su Zhang barely ever thought about those two, but once Xiaoyu brought it up, it all clicked. Xiaoyu said back then he'd been played and couldn't say a word about it. It was suffocating. Now you've had a taste of it yourself. After this, you'll understand how I felt. Xiao paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Then added, what I want is for you to be able to spot that kind of person from a mile and kick them to the curb on the spot. Don't ever let them anywhere near me. And said, now that I've learned my lesson and then understand what you wanted me to get, can you kick An Yushen to the curb right now and never let him near me again? Xiaoyu laughed. He said it wasn't the same thing. He needed to figure out what An Yushen was really after. Su Zhang's brow furrowed hard. He asked Xiaoyu, wasn't he obviously after him? Was there anything more worth going after than Xiao Yu? As far as concerned, Xiao Yu was one of a kind. It made total sense that someone would want him. What didn't make sense was the idea that someone wouldn't. Ji Xiaoyu and Yu Shen had been going back and forth for a while, and a good chunk of time had passed. Neither of them was in any. But the old man was getting antsy. He was on Yu Shen's case every single day to make a move. Even though Xiaoyu was perfectly nice to Yu Shen, and Yu Shen had the gut instinct of a seasoned gold digger, she could tell Xiaoyu had zero real feelings for her. The old man just brushed it off and told Yu Shen to find somewhere with a good vibe. Get Xiaoyu a little drunk, slip something in her drink. But Yu Shen shook her head the second after years of working her way up by latching onto wealthy men. She made it all the way to sales director. She wasn't about to break the law over some nobody's deal. But the moment she turned the old man down, her luck went completely off the rails. First, a deal she was about to close fell through. After getting ringed out by her boss, she walked out and got slapped across the face by some woman. It turned out she'd been messing around with that woman's husband. And it didn't stop there. People kept showing up to humiliate Yu Shen, plastering posters everywhere exposing her gold-digging history. The whole office was buzzing. Her boss basically pushed her out the door. Yu Shen knew she'd been set up, but she was outgunned. She had no choice but to crawl back to the old man and beg. Seeing Yu Shen broken and desperate, the old man was thrilled. He handed her the job and told her he'd set her up with a new job with way better pay. So Yu Shen reached out to Xiaoyu again. She showed up anxious and on edge, feeling completely backed into a corner like she had absolutely no other choice. But Xiaoyu played dumb and just went along with Yu Shen's lead. The two of them had dinner in a private room at when Xiaoyu got up to use the restroom, and Yu Shen pulled out the drug the old man had given her and slipped it into Xiaoyu. When Xiaoyu came back, she picked up her glass and looked like she was about to drink it. And Yu Shen kept her eyes locked on Guan's, watching her reach for the spiked drink. Her feelings were all over the place. But just then, Xiaoyu didn't drink it. She swilled the glass and asked Yu Shen, "What's in here?" She also said everything Yu Shen had caught on a hidden camera. Right then, the door to the private room swung open. Sou Zhang stepped out from behind the door, a 台不听 his hand. Now the screen was showing a live feed from the camera. And Yu Shen took one look and knew exactly what this was. She'd walked straight into a trap. After days of getting beaten down from every direction, she finally snapped. She immediately started begging for forgiveness and spilled everything all at once. Saidi decided to use it to her agenda. She had Yu Shen send a photo of Xiaoyu looking passed out. The photo was blurred out, and the message said if he wanted the full picture, he better send the money. Otherwise, she'd go make a deal with Sou Zhang to keep leverage over Xiaoyu. The old man caved. He sent the money. Once the money came through, and Yu Shen obviously never sent the old man the photo, she blocked him on WeChat without a second thought. Then Xiaoyu told Sou Zhang to trace the account name the payment came from and dig into it. She wanted to follow the money trail and find the real knockout blow to bury the old man for good. Sou Zhang got the picture. Once everything was wrapped up, Sou Zhang went on a date with Xiaoyu. They went to a calligraphy exhibition. At the entrance, they ran into Mai Xuyi and Zhu Pu. The four of them said their hellos. Mi and Xuyi suggested they all hang out together, but Sou Zhang wasn't into it at all. He said it was fine with just him and Xiaoyu, and adding them would just be awkward. And Mi and Xuyi were left speechless. Sou Zhang wasn't happy about it. But after Xiaoyu patiently talked him into, he grudgingly agreed, letting Xiaoyu lead him in by the hand, looking like a big sulky dog dragging its feet. The four of them headed inside. Xiaoyu's eyes were drawn to a piece of calligraphy hanging in the corner. It was a Tang Dynasty poem called Bei Tu Ying. A love of once gone can never be undone. Zhu Pu couldn't really make sense of it either, so she just picked out a line she understood and said, if you spill a glass of water, how could you ever get every drop back? Mai Xuyi patiently explained, water that flows east can never go back west. A fallen flower can never return to the branch it fell from. Love is like spilled water. Even if you gather it back up, the cup will never be full again. Xiaoyu found herself feeling a lot in that moment. Water flows east and never turns back. Spilled water gathered back won't fill the cup. After the calligraphy exhibition, Sou Zhang went ahead and bought the piece Xiaoyu had loved. When Xiaoyu got home and saw it, there was a bright, gleaming calligraphy scroll hanging on the white wall. She was absolutely stunned. And that wasn't all. Sou Zhang had also bought a full set of calligraphies and set them up in the study to practice. He was copying Master Fan's style. When Xiaoyu walked into the study, she saw she after she'd practiced lines about spilled water broken hearts. It gave her an instant headache. Sou Zhang had filled page after page with the same lines. That's about. Xiaoyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. While they were practicing calligraphy, Sou Zhang told Xiaoyu they had a lead on the account the old man had been wiring money, but tracking it down further would require outside help. Buxiong, Yu, and Sou Zhong immediately thought of the CFO who had already cashed out and walked away. When the CFO heard Sou Zhong needed a favor, he agreed without hesitation. He said he was a Ling Town and told them to come meet him. The CFO wasn't far from the city. He was at an estate on the outskirts of a neighboring town. The estate had been built by a wealthy family long ago and had a timeless classic feel. The company the CFO now worked for was looking to buy the property, so he had come along with the team to check it out. Built from brick wood, with an elaborate landscaped garden. But it had been abandoned for so long that it looked run down and desolate. The man-made lake had completely dried up, and the plants were with it. Xiaoyu looked around and found herself really drawn to the garden. After Xiaoyu asked the CFO about the financial records at Yuzhou during his time there, The CFO said if they wanted to find something fishy, they should start by looking into tax evasion. Xiaoyu's mind started racing. She suddenly thought of someone who might be able to help. Xing Simu. And her father had often handled the old man's dirty work. On top of that, she was sharp and detail-oriented. And Xiaoyu still had leverage over her father. Without wasting any time, Xiaoyu called Xing Simu and set up a meeting. After everything Xing Simu had been through, her loyalty to the old man was long now. She was very interested in what Xiaoyu was proposing. Once Xiaoyu and Xing Simu had ironed everything out, she headed back to her apartment to see her man. So Zhang was in the study practicing calligraphy. Xiaoyu was genuinely amazed when she saw his handwriting, because she had mentioned she liked master fan style. So Su Zhang had been copying it from a practice book, and was already 90% of the way. Xiaoyu asked Su Zhang, she'd been out running around for days. That's all he'd been doing. Su Zhang thought for a moment, and said there was something else, but it was a surprise, so he couldn't say yet. Xiaoyu leaned one hand on the desk, and cupped Su Zhang's ridiculously handsome face with the other, pressing him to tell her what the surprise was. Su Zhang 天天可以拿. You like the garden at the estate, right? So I bought it. He even pulled out the contract. So Zhang handed Xi Xiaoyu the sale contract and the deed. Xiaoyu told them and realized Su Zhang hadn't just bought the garden, he bought the entire estate. So Zhang told Xiaoyu the garden wasn't sold separately. Xiaoyu just stared at him, completely speechless. A few days later, Xing Simu took the evidence of the old man's tax evasion and reported him to the tax authorities. Faced with hard evidence, the old man had no weight and was forced to drain his savings to cover the massive shortfall. Xiaoyu then followed the trail of the old man's large cash movement and got her hands on his illegal offshore accounts. In the end, Xiaoyu gave the old man two options. Option 1, she turns the evidence over to the SEC and he spends his retirement behind bars. Option 2, he takes 500,000 a month as a retirement allowance and lives out his days in peace. At that point, the old man was completely finished. Of course, Xiaoyu had no interest in running Yuzhu. She kept only her shares, stayed out the manager, and handed the top position at Yuzhu over to Xing Simu. Once Xiaoyu had wrapped up everything with the Yuzhu group, Su Zhang sent a helicopter to pick her up, and they headed to the newly purchased. Xiaoyu stepped off by the lake and found Su Zhang waiting in a suit. Xiaoyu couldn't help but think, was he about to propose again? Su Zhang stepped forward to take her hand and asked if she'd noticed any. Xiaoyu blinked, having no idea what she was supposed to be noticing. Su Zhang pointed to the canal and said the water flows in a loop. Even when it runs east, it circles back west. Xiaoyu was caught off guard. She looked closely, and sure enough, Su Zhang took her hand and led her forward to the small garden she had raved about before. Inside the garden's pavilion, a piece of calligraphy hung on the white wall. This water doesn't have to stay spilled, so tell me, does the groom say yes? Xiaoyu knew right away Su Zhang had written it, and she couldn't help but think, this guy was an absolute hopeless romantic. Su Zhang then wheeled out an intricate contraption that caught the light with a metallic gleam. He picked up the glass from the table and started demonstrating. When Xiaoyu clearly had no idea what she just watched. Su Zhang, completely serious, said, I just showed you water spilling and coming back to fill a glass to the brim. Xiaoyu burst out laughing. Seeing that smile on Xiaoyu's face, Su Zhang felt a surge. He held out the now full glass to Xiaoyu and asked if she was willing to drink the water that had come by. Xiaoyu was touched. Then Su Zhang added that the equipment had been fully sanitized and water met drinking standards. Xiaoyu decided she was a lost cause, because somehow she found this side of him absolutely adorable. She smiled and nodded, took the glass, gave it a little shake, and heard a faint clinking sound. Resting at the bottom was a sparkling men's ring. Taking in everything Su Zhang had put into this moment, Xiaoyu finally said the word Su Zhang had been waiting so long to hear. I do.